Hello, party people. Great to see you. It's time for a new version of the program, Breaking Change. Uh, this one is going to be the hotly anticipated sequel to version 30. I've decided to call it version 31. Title: Full Searls Driving, because that's the big new thing. And if you don't already know what I mean by that, you will. Yeah. First, rewinding to other topics, just catching up on life. I've been working on my syndication app. So I've mentioned this a few times in the podcast. Right now, my homepage sort of just, you know, flings content left and right and center to different social platforms because no one goes and to a URL bar and types in a homepage anymore. And I'm just one person. I'm not going to be able to convince the whole world, hey, websites are cool again. Some people are trying. It's definitely there's the kindling of a potential let's just use websites renaissance here, but we're not there yet. And so in the furtherance of both reducing the number of random one-off Docker containers that are running on my Synology downstairs. Some are written in Python, some are written in Node.js, and then I've got a couple of Ruby ones that are, just monitoring an RSS feed and then integrating to exactly one platform, always in a different way, always with a different bespoke configuration file. What I've decided to do is build a Rails app and have it be a central source of configuration for where is my feed and a way to extend that configuration on a post by post basis with metadata that maybe isn't in the Atom or the RSS spec. And then from there, it's just if you're a programmer, you're familiar with the adapter pattern, maybe, where I just, I created an adapter first to Blue Sky, which turned out to be hard. And then one to Twitter X, which turned out to be easy. And then one to Mastodon, which was similarly easy. So I've got those three now. I'm testing, I'm iterating. I've got finally came up with a name, but you don't get to know the name, not yet, because I'm going to announce that at a later time. And I've got a mascot, which is great. And then best of all, I got the .com domain name. So it's like 3 for 3. This is hard to do in the year 2025 when all of the .coms, we're all talking about, climate change. People are talking about underpopulation, overpopulation, aging populations, the natural resource crunch that we're under. We're talking about not having enough lithium for our batteries, but no one's talking about the .com crisis or the lack of good .coms. There's people squatting on them, not using them. Seems like the regulation to try to be anti-squatter and stuff where there's like a $1,400 fee and you can go and complain to ICANN. No one actually does that. Now there's all these other TLDs like .lunch and .accountant that are run by, in many cases, sort of fly-by-night companies that just charge usurious rates. Justin.ceo was not cheap. I don't like the current domain landscape, and I don't think that these vanity TLDs are breaking through public consciousness in the way that everyone would hope. Where if I say, hey, my website is, justin.bike, most people would be confused because that's not net or org or com or gov. And the people who aren't confused would be like, that's great, but what is a website? Or you expect me to go to a website? All right, sicko. So I got the .com of the name that I want that you still don't get to know, but I will riff on having found the name for a bit. So now I'm in the throes of trying to figure out what's the best way to make a static splash page, just announcing what this thing is, explaining a little bit the feature set because it's a non-obvious application, and probably skip on pricing. It's not ready to launch or anything like that, but I want to have some place where you could sign up for a wait list. So that's pretty much where my head's at. I've been working on that day in, day out. I'll have more to share later. And of course, when that splash page comes up, I'm sure I'll talk about it again. If you don't follow me on all these other things, and if you don't, then I suppose you're not yet benefiting from the app. And if you do, then you are, without even knowing it, you're using it, because that's how those posts are being delivered to you, so that I don't have to log in. And I know a lot of people know that because I talk about it a lot, but then they still reply to my Mastodon toots or my tweets anyway, on the off chance that I'm going to notice them. And so I try to go out of my way to not like things in the platforms and not reply in the platforms, to train people to think that I'm not there, as well as to train myself that I'm not there. But of course, like, I've been in them more lately because I'm setting up these automations. I want to make sure that things look right, while I'm testing. And so I'm actually in there more, and it's taken some self-control to not actually engage with people who are engaging at me. But nope. Once this thing's set up and I'm logged off, I'm not looking at that. You can email me. podcast@searls.co. And if you email the program, then I read it back to you. I answer it gently as I can. I mean, some of the questions aren't great. I'm just going to put that out there. You could just make a comment. You could just say a declarative sentence. And if it's an interesting sentence, I will read it. And then I will ponder it extemporaneously. Other stuff going on. I cut my newsletter. I have a monthly newsletter, Searls of Wisdom, that I try to find things to talk about that are important to me. And the problem is that sometimes a month will go by and nothing feels particularly poignant or meaningful. And if it does, is it something that's other people will find interest in? So I was fortunate when this patch hit for RuboCop that adds support for extensions that adhere to my lint roller API. And so if you don't know what these proper nouns mean, I explain it in the newsletter. But the upshot is a gem, an API, like an open source library that I wrote, is about to get a lot more usage by people who, again, mostly don't know that it's there. But it's going to be more integral to the Ruby ecosystem in terms of number of people that have it installed, the number of people who are running it as, they're developing code. And it's just it made me think a lot about the legacy that we leave behind. There's different kinds of legacy. Some people have kids and families. Some people have friends. Some people have code that they write that other people then run. And I obviously we all leave traces of ourselves in various ways. But I spent the time in the newsletter reflecting on legacy and why legacy is one of my kind of core motivators. Whereas for a lot of people, I think they just don't. Something gets you up in the morning, and it doesn't seem like that sort of cosmic, like the impact you want to have on the world is necessarily. Well, okay. I think everyone wants to have an impact in the world. I think some people think in terms of present tense and some people think in terms of future tense. And I am a future tense impact wanter, which can sometimes make me feel cold and calculating because I'm always thinking many years out, and not particularly generous in the moment with my time or money or whatever. So anyway, you can check that out. It's justin.searls.co/newsletter if you want to sign up. I actually redid also last week the navigation for the website. So now on the mobile display, it's much slicker. You got the classic. Everyone loves a hamburger icon. You get a hamburger icon at the top right. You tap that, and then you get a kind of cool series of animations. And there's no JavaScript. Zero JavaScript was harmed in the production of this very interactive, very slick little mobile menu. It now mirrors the desktop menu, so it looks the same on both viewports. And it's got a big old subscribe button there. So you can click that, and then you can see how to follow me in different ways. Why am I telling you this? You're already you're a member of the committee of people who are extremely close to the solar flares of heat circling the orbit of my content. You know this shit already. I talk about all this stuff all the time. The fact that I've decided that my first act as an independent software producer is going to be about self-publishing is going to result in only more meta and self-referential links back to myself and other shit that I did. Oh, here's an example of the kind of Atom feed you need. It just happens to be my blog. And oh, have you checked out over here to this email integration? It just happens to run my newsletter. I'm sorry. I'm very, very sorry. I am also sick of saying my own name. Let's see. Becky was traveling. She just got back late last night from Colombia. She went on a trip with some other folks on like a tour, like a fancy tour. And they sounds like they had a great time. I went out of my way to I'm going to make food that, just clear out stuff from the fridge and the freezer because I'm not a fancy guy. I'll eat anything. But we had a box of 2 pounds of snow crab that I'd frozen that I bought for Kroger because it was on sale. And the problem with buying something like that is shellfish is kind of finicky to make. It doesn't fit into any of your normal recipes typically. I don't think, I'm gonna definitely have that crab tonight with the 20 hours in advance to properly defrost it. And so it just sits there. So all week I was like, make the crab. I'd pull the crab out 24 hours ahead so that it's properly defrosted before I go to make it. And I have a pressure cooker, a Ninja pressure cooker that has a similar to an Instant Pot. You can steam in it. So it's boiling, it's steaming and whatnot. And I think what I've learned is that if you close the cover while it's steaming, it will get too hot very fast. Because I left the first batch of snow crab claws and legs while steaming with the cover closed for 15 minutes. And it came out and it looked like it had been bleached in the desert sun for about 2 weeks. And it was hard as a rock. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to eat this. And then the second batch, I was like, okay, well, I'll just check it at the 5-minute mark. And then that was the remainder of the crab. I'll just check in at the 5-minute mark, see how this crab's doing. Oh my God. It's also just absolutely irradiated. So I managed to burn through 2 pounds and $20 of crab very, very quickly. And then I resorted to eating, I think, packages of tuna and rice instead. That was my penance. So just loving the bachelor life. For a whole week, realizing that I stay up real late by default, and I don't really stop working. And so I think having a cohabitant, is that what we say? A cohabitation partner? Living with someone is probably good for me overall in terms of finding an appropriate balance to one's daily life. Because I was... if you've ever seen the Rugrats meme from the old cartoon of the dad, why, wife comes down, it's like, honey, why are you making pudding at 2 a.m? And he responds, because I've lost all control of my life. I think there were elements of that there when it was midnight and I was reorganizing the pantry. I was like, man, I need to learn how to rest in the absence of other people. And just play a video game for fuck's sake. So that was I'm going to be thinking about that for a bit, figuring that out. I don't know where this came up, but it landed in this note because I feel like as a public service announcement for anyone who out there, maybe you feel very alone, isolated, like you don't fit in, like other people don't respect you. I want to talk to you if you're one of the walks around town listening to something in their AirPods, but only wearing a single AirPod at a time while you do it. Because you might think that you're the only one who does that because everyone says that's weird or everyone insists on always wearing 2 of them. But you're not. Because I am coming out of the closet today as a single AirPod user. I typically, if I'm listening to my AirPods, it's almost always going to be a podcast. Sometimes it's music, like when I'm working out. So, well, no, not even then. I just fucking don't listen to music unless I need to unless I'm having a panic attack and I just need to chill. I'm trying to relax. I basically am only listening to podcasts, and I don't need spatial audio of like mostly poorly mixed podcasts. So I mostly just have it in one ear, and then the other ear is free to have air go in and out of it. I can hear other things while I'm doing that. And I know, I think I'm mentioning this because I overheard somebody in a conversation talk. They were talking about how they would never use just one. And I was like, wow, it's nice. And then on top of it, you get double the battery life. It's like once in a while, if I'm listening to a lot of stuff all day, I'll get the little low battery sound on the one AirPod. It's like, don't worry, man, pop you back in the case. Get your brother out of there, pop him in. And now while I'm listening, you're recharging. Basically, you get infinite listening time. So that's pretty neat. I don't know. I recommend it. That is a life update in that I realize now that I've been bottling up that part of myself, and I don't know what kind of harm that was inflicting upon my, karma or my psyche. So I just want to get it out there that listening to something with just one AirPod in at a time is a totally valid lifestyle choice that I choose for myself most of the time. That said, there are a handful of gotchas. And one of the gotchas is if you configure the stems to do different things when you press and hold, it's a bad time, right? If you have like left is your Siri and right is your noise cancellation rotation between transparency or adaptive audio and noise cancellation. Like when you're only wearing one, it's only going to do that one function. So that's why I always have to configure the two stems to do the same shortcut. Yeah, that sucks. Another thing that is a little bit rough, once in a while, very rarely, it'll get confused and it'll actually not play audio out of the one in your ear and start playing audio in the one that is not in your ear. It's almost like a separated at birth twin kind of phenomenon. And so it's pretty rare these days. They've mostly ironed that kind of stuff out. But there's another one. What was I thinking? The one that really gets you. Oh man, it really gets you. It's going to come back to me. I don't normally just have a total like loss of train of thought here, but yeah, I'm pretty much, oh, it's the microphone. See, it came back. Little panic attack there for a second. I should listen to some music. Anyway, I won't be listening to music because when you have an AirPod that's trying to use the microphone, what seems to happen typically, right, is users are expected to have two AirPods in their ears at all time while operating. I was going to say operating a motor vehicle, but technically in a lot of states you should not. It's illegal to have headphones in while you're driving, which is also weird because the same thing that's your headphone could also be a hearing aid now. I haven't seen anyone explore that. But while you have both of the earbuds in, if you are on a call or in a state where the microphone is picking up and it switches to that Bluetooth audio profile that is two directional, so you have worse sounding both, really bad quality recording out of them, but also bad quality like audio back for listening. When you're in that profile, it seems like something in the computers between the two buds will just select which of them is going to be the microphone. Once in a while, when you only have one AirPod in your ear, it will actually like pick the one that's in the case. And so if I've only got one AirPod in, I'm sometimes reticent to just click the stem to answer a phone call because there's a not 50%, but a greater than 10% chance that I'll talk and they will just not hear me until I run downstairs and either pop the other one in or just take it out and switch to speakerphone or something. So there are, like any alternative lifestyle choice, like being left-handed, for example, there are things in society that make life a little bit more difficult. We could all use a little bit more tolerance and inclusivity for people who aren't just like the mainstream. So there you go. While I'm talking about shit that doesn't matter, one last thing that doesn't matter, but matters to me. Where is, I'm going to pull this out. This is my first podcast that I'm recording completely on video. And if you're watching this on video, I was successful. And if you're not, you're going to hear me describe things I'm doing with my hands right now for just a moment. 1 second. All right, I'm back. Okay. I know in radio, you're not supposed to leave dead air, which is one problem that I create intentionally with this podcast because I want you to think every now and then. Wait, did my shit just pause? I want you to think that because it keeps you on your toes. Because this is a long show. So anyway, I've got a black, Space Black MacBook Pro M4 with M4 Pro. It made me very, very sad because it was brand new. It was 15 days old, right? Just outside of the return window. When I was in Detroit, or, in southeastern Michigan after my dad passed away, so over the holidays, I was literally in a laundry room in the hotel writing his obituary, writing a second draft of the obituary that we all collaborate on together, and realized that the table in the laundry room was not properly secured. And so I set a can of Coke down, I set the laptop down, I started to sit down, and then the whole table surface collapsed to the floor, and this MacBook just crunched against the wall, against the braces, against everything. And the problem with this very new fancy Space Black finish is that when it gets dinged up, it just, the scratches on that finish, all you see is like a pure bright silver. It stands in stark contrast to the actual color of that anodized Space Black. And so a company called Firanto, which seems to mostly do paint for motocross or some sort of like fancy racing vehicles. Firanto sells a specialized paint that looks like this. It's like a paint pen / brush thing. And I bought it, and it shipped from Europe, and it came yesterday. And I was like, all right, I'll try to paint those spots. And so I don't know to what extent you'll be able to see any of the blotches. It's close, but I'm bad at things. And so I wasn't the smoothest I could be in trying to apply it. It was like more material than I really needed. And I couldn't, even with the brush, it was like, I got to wipe it a little bit. So it didn't turn out great. And it's a little bit shinier than the finish itself, I'd say. But I will say it's at least the color matches much more closely than like bright silver on black. So if you also have a Space Black MacBook Pro, I will include the link to this Firanto touch-up paint, which is just funny because it's like a car touch-up, stick. Except the printing says, for Apple MacBook Pro M3. Oh, okay. That's why. It's for the M3, and I got the M4. Space Black. I'm just kidding. Supposedly nothing changed in the finish between the M3 and the M4, but goodness knows. That's, with my luck, that's probably the issue. Almost dropped it again. I was trying to be quick as I set that back down. And if I had dropped it again, that would have been funny. Not like ha-ha funny, but, funny. All right. And that's everything going on in my life. How are you? I was just kidding, by the way, when I asked how you are, because I can't hear you because of how this all works. So let's just circle the wagons on a few follow-up items of stuff that we've talked about in the past that's come up again in the last couple weeks. One of them, I bought a travel router, like a little guy, like tiny bunny rabbit ears. Is $60. It's Wi-Fi 6, so it's not like the latest and greatest. And the reason that I bought it, and this is a little weird, is to use in my home to create a separate SSID with separately selected radio frequencies and a different channel, so that I can use Mac Virtual Display without worrying about my Wi-Fi network congestion so much. So Mac Virtual Display is a feature for the Vision Pro. I've talked about it a bunch. It's the thing where you can cast your Mac screen into the Vision Pro, and there's no wired way to do it, truly wired. There sort of is. Okay, so if you buy the $300 developer strap, you can connect USB-C to your Mac and initiate the Mac Virtual Display that way. But teardowns reveal it's a USB 2 connection, and so you're getting honestly, especially with the new 8K ultra wide, probably a degraded experience to some extent versus it had it been a USB 3 connection. Under the hood, it acts just like Sidecar. So if you ever use an iPad as a monitor on a Mac, it's that feature. It just happens either wirelessly or wired, and the wired connection is subpar. Well, the problem with the wireless connection is like a lot of our networks are also subpar. So what I ultimately did was I bought a travel router. I gave it a separate SSID. I selected you'd think that 5 gigahertz, because that's like lower latency, and in shorter connections, higher can hit higher speeds. You'd think 5 gigahertz would have been better, but weirdly, in all my testing, 2.4 gigahertz actually was more reliable and lower latency. So it might have been just a radio congestion stuff. And that would actually make some sort of sense, because on the other network, sometimes I would just get, it was like a cloud would come by of just radio waves. I know that sounds nutty, but that's actually how it works. A former client of ours at Test Double, like they actually specialize in looking at the EM situation in a physical space, and like their whole product revolves around the fact that it changes every day. So if you're into astrology or crystals, you know that already, I guess. But anywho, the setup looks something like this. So I took a new Ethernet cable into the switch down here. So I got a 4-port switch that only had 3 things plugged into it in my office. So I ran a little cable around the wall over there, and then back, and that Ethernet cable, just RJ45 cable, it connects to the travel router as the upstream port. It also has a downstream port available, and so I plugged that into the MacBook Pro. So the MacBook Pro is hardwired, and then the travel router is broadcasting that special SSID that only the Vision Pro ever accesses. And it auto-joins that one. It doesn't auto-join the others. And in my testing so far, all my other devices have not decided to, like my iCloud synced Apple devices have not decided to start signing up for that particular SSID. So it has that wireless network just to itself, which is nice. So that was the experiment, was if I'm on a router that is, it's in bridge mode, it's like an access point. I should be using the term access point. If I'm sitting in my chair and there's an access point that is both the thing that my computer is hardwired into and the thing that the Vision Pro is wirelessly communicating with, it's theoretically only one hop. So low congestion on the Wi-Fi and only one hop over Ethernet for the MacBook. It should be faster. It should be like lower latency. It should be more reliable. And the upshot, the results of these experiments, and I spent a couple hours tweaking it, is that it is better, I think. A few weird things. You apparently cannot initiate a Vision Pro Mac Virtual Display session if Wi-Fi is turned off on the MacBook Pro. Like, it has to do some kind of Wi-Fi handshake, whether that's peer-to-peer stuff or something, to get it started. And then once it starts, you can actually turn the Wi-Fi off again on the MacBook Pro, and that's fine. And your mouse is still moving, you're still tracking. So it must be just some sort of connectivity handshake at the front of the connection. So that's a little bit weird. But then afterwards, it's clearly communicating over Ethernet. So I don't exactly know how any of this works. But, the reason that I went to all this trouble is because I would sit down and work. And most mornings, Mac Virtual Display would be rock solid, flawless. But then every 5 or 6 days, I would notice, oh man, every time I type or click a thing, like it's missing a click, or something's taking a long time to pop up. Or if I'm playing audio through the Mac now, which is a new feature in visionOS 2.1. Anyway, like if I'm listening to, say, music, it'll just like hitch, like skip, like a CD player used to skip. It's a bad experience, and you just when humans experience that kind of latency and unreliability, sort of, even if we're able to still do the work, it just wears you down, kind of almost subconsciously, and you get more frustrated and exhausted. So that's the problem I'm solving for, and I'll keep you posted. But so far, it's actually working really well, and it might be a solution for any of the 8 of us who are doing this every day. It might be a solution if you also have a complicated home network. And I would expect that the Venn diagram of people who have overly complicated home networks and are using the Vision Pro in earnest is probably a circle. So like, I don't know, maybe I'll write a blog post to get the word out to the fans of the Vision Pro. If you have a Vision Pro and you're not using it for anything, hit me up. I want to hear about your not using Vision Pro stories, podcast@searls.co. And write in with creative ideas of what you could be doing with them, or what it would take to get you to start using them, or why you haven't sold them yet. Those are all interesting questions. Boy, I'm going to take a beat because the next 7 or 8 items are all about the same thing. I don't know how much time I'm going to spend on this. It could take us a little while. As foretold in version 30, Becky and I have decided, the timing's not great, but we've made an important life decision. And we picked a hell of a month to do it, but we bought a Tesla, an electric vehicle from Tesla Motors. It's a Model Y. It's a 2024. It's certified pre-owned, so I feel a little bit better that I'm buying it used. But Tesla's got good people working at it. It's one of the 2 companies like SpaceX that's like, unlike Twitter, like seems to find a way to insulate the actual company part from Elon to a great extent. Not that that's hard because he's so fucking distracted doing whatever the fuck he's doing. Like, it's not like he's going to work. Living in Florida, you kind of want to ride the line a little bit. You want to kind of be a cipher, keep everyone on their toes. You don't want either side to think you're fully in their camp, because that wouldn't be safe. So, somebody actually walked by as I was setting it up. I was like trying to install mud flaps on it, and they're like, "Oh, new Tesla?" He's like, "Yeah." "Oh yeah, me and my husband have one." And then it's almost as if we were both racing to be like, "I'm not a big Elon fan though." So there's that. Meanwhile, there's the guy with, God, there's probably 4 Cybertrucks in my neighborhood and those are ugly vehicles. And of course, 2 have "Make America Great Again" stickers all over them. The reason we got it has nothing to do with the fact it's an electric vehicle. That's nice. Like, in theory, we would like an electric vehicle. Like, it seems like a thing that, is good, has certain benefits. They're much simpler to manufacture. They're cheaper, in terms of run costs. There's much less maintenance to worry about in an EV. But both our cars were fine and would have lasted another 5 to 10 years. Now, the reason is unlike a lot of people who drive and either enjoy driving or tell themselves that they enjoy driving, we fucking hate it. That's on our family crest. All of us Searlses, we just hate driving. What? If I loved driving, I would imagine that I would get on a plane or get on a train and sit down and instead of reading a book or playing a game or watching a movie, I'd sit down and just be fuming because I'd be like, I should be driving this train. I should be flying this plane. I want to be driving. I'm a driving guy. No. If I'm in a car, ideally, I don't want to be driving. I want someone else to drive me. The only problem with that typically is that someone else is a human who, unless you have a stretch limo, it's a human that you have to talk to, have or exist with. That human's going to have smells. They're going to come with smells. Sorry. They're going to play weird music. They're going to, you may have been in an Uber or a Lyft before, and you know that experience. Tesla full self-driving, which is the feature, it's what they call the supervised driving mode, where your hand's off the wheel, you're looking at it driving, it's turning on all the turn signals for you, and then it's executing the turns, it's accelerating, it's braking, it's driving stuff, changes lanes, all that jazz. You give it a destination, you initiate it, and then you're kind of just, your job is to make sure that it's taking you where you got to go. The experience is very different from if you've used lane assist technology, or adaptive cruise control, which I've done, right? You turn that on, it keeps you in your lane, maybe it speeds you up, slows you down. Those ones always create a false sense of security in me right away. I'm like, I'm less attentive. I I trust it to be doing more than it's doing, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, it's flashing at me. I got to hit the brakes myself or whatever. Uh, I thought that's what full self-driving with the Tesla would be like, and the reason we bought it is it feels very unlike that. Instead, here's the analogy that seems to make the most sense in my brain at this point. Granted, maybe this will change. Maybe it'll get even better. Maybe I will, become a couch potato and turn my brain off and make mistakes. God forbid. But instead, like when you're driving with full self-driving supervised enabled in a Tesla, it feels like you're in an Uber without a human Uber driver to worry about, and you are in the driver's seat. So you can always disengage, you can hit the brake, but like the trust level is exactly like a Lyft driver that sort of, has a certain body odor, right? Or seems like this is a man who did not grow up as a child thinking I'm going to be a contract driver someday as like his life goal. They all got there somewhere. He's not particularly happy to be there in that role necessarily. Maybe he likes the money. Maybe he does it on the side. Maybe he's trying to make ends meet. But like a lot of times you're in an Uber or a Lyft and like, you're like, I don't think this is the best driver in the world. I don't think they're here for the driving experience either. Right. And you find yourself in such a situation like I do. You know what? Like, I think he's taken us the wrong way. And so like I'm surreptitiously on my phone and I'm doing the same navigation and I'm looking at like, okay, this. Nope, he should be turning right here. Why, honey, he's not turning right here. And you get frustrated. And then maybe you make a comment to the driver and then he rolls his eyes and gets, it has a chilling effect in the car is what it has. So full self-driving is kind of like that. It's like the Uber driver that you don't really trust. The net effect of that is that you can always take over. You can actually, if it's turning left or if it's going straight and you want it to turn right, you can actually just hit the stalk and signal right. And it'll generally like, okay, I'll turn right here, and it'll turn right. And then eventually it'll reroute itself and it'll find the right way based on that, which is kind of clever. But additionally, it's the fact that the trust is low results in me supervising it. Like they call it supervised mode, but I feel like I am a co-pilot. A co-pilot is there, right? One of us is driving, the other one, it's like I've got a swivel on my neck. Instead of just staring down, and being very, very procedural in my thoughts and actions, like I usually am when I'm manually driving, it's doing the really boring part where it's actually looking in 8 directions at once. But like me as a human with just eyes in front of me, I'm just like looking and focused and I'm not looking to the left and I'm not looking to the right. But now I have like freedom of movement. So I'm looking around and I'm saying like, oh wow, there's like, a whole bunch of kids that just got out of school and they're all on scooters and they're darting and they're weaving, right? Or maybe, like a couple nights ago, I was coming home at night after going out with some guys. And going out with the guys. Anyway, I was coming home at night. And normally I'd be thinking like, man, I'm tired. And I'll try to stay in my lane. And that's where my head's at. I was like, stay in the lane. Just try to like, go at a reasonable pace. And don't, because people get a little sloshy at night. But I'm mostly focused on myself and just driving defensively successfully. And this time I was like, I was just looking at the car ahead and I see he's the one who's weaving. And he's, going over the line and whatnot a couple times. And honestly, I might have noticed that if I'd been manually driving. It wasn't extreme. But the car noticed. And then I saw the car with no other reason to just back off. Like, give him an extra 20 feet. As if it was prepared for a sudden stop, right? It's interesting because it uses now at this point, it's all neural net. It's all like, machine learned based on just gobs and gobs. My brother said, if you were to like tether your phone instead of use the built-in LTE in the car while it's doing self-driving, you will just burn through gigabytes very, very quickly. So clearly, like they are using, they call it the fleet of all of the vehicles out there for a massive amount of training data that is then used to improve it. And so when you think of how much time we spent talking about Sam Altman and OpenAI and whether they have a moat, and you compare it to other foundational models doing AI stuff. They're kind of all competing for the same set of training data, which is like everything that a human's ever written or done, and then everything that we can contract people in Southeast Asia or South Asia and Africa to do for us in terms of clicking on what's a bike, what's not a bike, what's a hot dog, what's not a hot dog, or typing stuff for us or filling out forms for us, or whatever it is that actually goes into building those foundational models. But in general, even that stuff's resold. And so like they're operating on a very finite amount of training data, and we've mostly run out of it, which is why we're now running into these distillation techniques. Whereas every Tesla on the road that has analytics enabled and telemetry, and by the way, I was actually very impressed with the privacy settings. Like it does really tell you like, this goes to Tesla, this doesn't go to Tesla. You can uncheck on a granular level lots of things like the cabin camera and whether the audio can go up to Tesla after, FSD detects a problem and that sort of thing. Very surprising given the founder's behavior. And he's not even the founder, don't get me wrong. The CEO who calls himself founder, who kind of hijacked the company from the two actual founders of Tesla. That guy. Happy President's Day, Elon. Jesus. Anyway, I just want to say, like, having a car that drives itself, that takes you from A to B, and you're able to actually pay attention to what's going on around you, feels like an improvement over just manually driving. I feel somehow safer in this configuration. Like the car and I are working as a team to have a better driving experience. And the sad thing about it is, like, I know it's a low bar, but it's like already a better driver than me. And so like it's aggressive in the moments that, are safe to be aggressive, that I would have sat back and waited to turn left for like 20 minutes out of fear. But it's also way more cautious. Like it doesn't do the California stops where it just kind of rolls through stop signs in residential areas and stuff. Like it's very proper and comes to a full stop, and it follows the rules of the road in ways that I don't. So yeah, I know that's against the narrative, and I know I'm really not being an ally here by talking up Tesla. But if you're like me and you don't like driving, maybe do that. The pickup experience, because it was a pre-owned, was like a little bit less luxurious. It was similar to the last time when my brother and I picked up his car. We being me, because Becky was in Colombia, I had to go sit in the DMV and spent like 4 hours, more than that. It was a 6-hour trip overall to go to take her off the registration and the title of the car that we were trading in, so that I could trade it in her absence. So I went and picked up the car by myself, and first there were some damage that they caught only after delivery, and so I had to come back a couple days later. And I appreciate them giving me a heads up, as opposed to they caught the problem and they called me while I was en route, rather than make it my job to refuse delivery. So I thought that was a good experience. I came back, picked it up. Little things that you'd think, like, for being such a software forward company, I was in the car, and about 6 hours later after I came home, I was like, wait a second, like I'm registering another key, like a key card, because it uses cards as keys, or your phone or your Apple Watch. And I was like, I gotta go check the key, the locks tab of like, show me all the keys in this car. I figured that they would have factory reset the car to just virgin, tight, brand new records or database, right? Like, why would you keep the previous customers? You're certified pre-owned. You've probably got a button for this. Why would you keep the previous customer stuff there? Well, they did. And that's how I found like Kamal's iPhone still paired to it. And 20 fucking other key cards are all paired to it. And I was like, well, that seems bad. So I went through and I removed each of those ones one at a time. I don't know if that means he was able to still see the thing in the app or what, but not fantastic. The purchasing process, though, there's no haggling. No one who works there is in a position to haggle. There's just a series of checkboxes that they have to do in their app, and then sometimes that will instigate a checkbox that has to happen in your app, right? And so there's a lot of, it reminded me of middle school, me and the guy who's working at the Tesla dealership, when I would plug in the Game Boy Link cable to trade Pokemon from my Pokemon Blue cart to somebody's Pokemon Red cartridge, where you'd plug it all in, you'd go through the process, and then you'd be like, all right, did you select it? Did you select it? Let me see. Okay, you selected it. And okay, now I'll select my Pokemon. Then you hit go, and then you wait, and then the Pokemon cross in transit, and then you confirm it. It was like trading Pokemon with him, except I was trading money to him, and he was giving me a car, because okay, I signed on my end. Now pull to refresh. And I pulled to refresh, and I was like, okay, I see it now. And I go through, and I tap sign there, and then go back and forth. And there were like 4 rounds of this, to the point where it was like a little bit awkward. But no, they were a total champ. So good time overall. If I've somehow convinced you that you also don't want to drive a car anymore, and you want a discount, and you want to buy new, I've got a Tesla referral link. I'm going to call it the sponsor of the episode, because I seem to be carrying a lot of fucking water for that asshole. So if you want to buy a Tesla, I'll put that referral link in the show notes. Or you could email me, podcast@searls.co, and I will send it to you. And I think you save $2,500 on a new Tesla if you choose to use that code. I don't know. Or I get $500 in a kickback, and I get $500 in a kickback. And I'll use that $500 inappropriately, just an FYI. Oh, one other thing. You buy a Tesla because you want the full self-driving. It's important to know that's not free. And right now the price is $100, $99 a month, and or $8,000 is a one-time purchase. I don't intend, because that's like an iPad on wheels, I don't intend for this thing to be my forever vehicle. Becky and I are both going to use it as our main vehicle, and so our gas-powered car becomes kind of the spare, because it's so good at changing profiles. Like, it can both be basically our car, customized to our liking. So why not just both use it? Because we don't drive. We could probably get away as a one-car family. Yeah. So, man, I'm all over the place. I had an end of that sentence, but there I am. Am I tired? Have I eaten enough crab lately? No, that is an issue. I'm gonna work on that. Yeah. So anyway, it's not free. It feels like it should be free, because I've heard from a lot of Tesla fans like that they get trial offers all the time for extending 30 days. They don't have to pay for it very often. And the hubbub in the Tesla community is that Tesla came way out the gate way too early with something that they called full self-driving that did not work very well and was not very safe. It used to be a big tarball of C++ code of ifs and elses of what the car should do, and now it's much more reactive and based on this machine learning model. As a result, it sure as hell seems to me like most Teslas that I see in the wild are being very manually driven by people, because they are just as bad at driving as everyone else on the road. Whereas a handful of times I've seen other people, with the hands on the lap while they watch the Tesla, do its thing. Those cars are not the ones out there causing problems. If anything, they're a little too deferential. I had to pass a school that was letting kids out, and I had like 4 parents blow through a right turn when I actually had the right of way, because the car was being kind enough to not just tear forward and stick its elbows out there. Yeah, I don't know. That's enough Tesla talk for me. I could use a palate cleanser. I don't know about you. All right. Well, let's look at the pun of the week of the month. Pun of the version 31. All right. What do we got? What do we got here? Unfortunately, I had scrolled to the correct position in this iMessage chat, but if you jiggle the handle on these things, it scrolls back to bottom. So now I'm going all the way up to Thursday, I think. So an iMessage is how Aaron sends me the puns. I know I say this every fucking time, but you never know. And I never even said who Aaron. Aaron Patterson goes by Tender Love. He likes puns. Every one of these episodes, he writes a pun for you, for the show. And then I rank it. So this is season 2 of Breaking Change, because it is a year 2025. It's our second year, so it's our second season. There have been 3 puns so far, and we're going to see how this one ranks. So I'm peeling back the invisible link now. I'm thinking of starting a YouTube channel for physicists and calling it Mass Media. I'm thinking of starting a YouTube channel for physicists and calling it Mass Media. Okay. All right. Mass is an important concept in physics. And mass media, of course, refers to like mainstream media, like broadcast television, clear channel radio, popular newspapers. And of course, the joke being that YouTube channels, especially little tiny ones made by Aaron, are not mass media. They are niche. What's the opposite of mass? They're small media. So, yeah. I mean, I'm not delighted by it, and I'm not particularly offended by it. I think this might be a sign of a bad pun, is that, like, it does not elicit a strong feeling from me. But maybe I'm just in a mood. I don't know. Maybe you heard this one and it lit a fire. It lit you something fierce. I don't know. But how am I going to rank it, right? We only have 3 other ones here. Is it better or worse than our 3rd ranked one for 25? I was really hoping to play Balatro today, but I don't have time, so I guess it's not in the cards. That one, of course, is of limited appeal because you have to know what Balatro is. But if you strictly think of it's not in the cards as the joke versus mass media and physics, I think it's not in the cards, talking about a card game, is like, the card one edges that out slightly. But YouTube has staying power, because now every time I see a Kurtzegard or that one PBS guy who does the science stuff, I'm going to think, why didn't you name this mass media? That's better. So the pun is going to linger. And the aftertaste is you taste the metal in your mouth for a while. That's the hormone that Aaron's searching for. Second ranked is, I heard most cars are designed by a steering committee, which again, that's just a right down the middle, borderline Laffy Taffy joke. Oh, this is tough. We started this year with a banger. I bought a Nintendo Switch because I heard it was going to be really fun to play. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it one bit, and now I feel like I've been Joy-Conned. No, that was the second one, right? Yeah, so that was the second one this year. That's still the best. I think this is tough. Because on the one measure, this is right neck and neck with third, but I think it's also clearly better than the second. But also, I'm not here to re-rank the past. I can't change the past. That's what the pun sort at the end of the year is for. So I'm going to say this is our new number 2. I'm going to err on the side of being generous, I say. Right? So we're going to see if copy and paste still works. Okay. It's in the file, everyone. I feel like a Ghostbuster, and you threw the trap out and you like stomp on the pedal and you get the ghost. It's like, I got the pun. It's trapped. It's in my file system. And then I'm going to get committed and put it in the cold storage underneath the firehouse. All right. So that's what we got for you today. If you come here expecting a funny joke, this is the wrong podcast. This is what you get. This is what we could afford on our budget. We are not mass media. So let's talk about the people who are, who do real journalism over in the news. First bit of news, and it's news because it's the first time it's ever happened in the history of me recording podcasts, is I apparently had my fly down for the first half of the show. And that's embarrassing. But I'm saying it out loud anyway, because I'm that kind of broken. First item, E3 organizer, ESA. If you are a gamer, one or both of those will be familiar acronyms. E3 was the entertainment expo, something, electronic entertainment expo. It rose to, public prominence in the mid late 90s, if not early 2000s for some folks, because it was the successor to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, for video games specifically. Basically, the story as I remember it was in the early 90s, video games had become such a dominant force at CES that it was crowding out a lot of the traditional computer makers and frankly like wealthier and more domestic companies. Watching a bunch of foreign-owned video game makers dominate the show floor and the media attention was creating conflict among the exhibitors who were paying top dollar to have booths and keynotes and fill out the convention hall. So a decision was made to break it out into a separate event called E3. And if you read any gaming magazines, that was the mecca. That was like the whole year of news and releases. They always would revolve around what's going to get announced at E3 this year. Brian Stelter, who's a CNN correspondent, has a Saturday show, and he's written several books. He's a big guy, figuratively. He's like a year younger than me, and he and I actually used to write video game sites together. Weirdly, first I was mostly Nintendo focused, and so at Tendo Project I helped him there. These were his sites, but I was his helper, and it's one of the reasons I learned about publishing. I mean, he's a journalist. He spent a long time at New York Times before going to CNN, and before that he was like blogging about like the media industry, which of course, no way to get into that industry faster than to be the guy running the gossip column about you. And the New York Times, I think, outed him because it was a pseudonymous blog. And then they were like, I feel bad. And then they hired him. And so his whole career has taken off. But one of the 3 sites that we worked on together was at e3.com. Talk about a .com back then. You could get it. And I remember looking at it and be like, this is a great domain, bud. But like, it looks like 8.3. What did you eat 3 of? ATE3.com. And we would cover the event, and he had 1 or 2 sources. I think like Stephen Kent. Sorry if I'm outing this, if this is a secret. I don't think it is. But Stephen Kent was an electronic writer at MSNBC. And unlike us, who were in like middle school, early high school, Stephen Kent was an adult who presumably could drive a car. And he had a receding hairline, so that's how you could trust him. He was at the event, and would baby bird information back to us, and then we would just hammer out news story after news story. And we got like hundreds of thousands of unique visitors when we would do one of these event sites. So IGN was like linking to us from their front page. It's a weird deep cut in the Justin Searls background of stuff. But I talk a lot about how I used to write video game websites when I was very young. It's what got me into being an online person. And E3 was the big event until it wasn't. It started, in my opinion, when Nintendo started doing their Nintendo Direct videos. That was a direct-to-consumer online. Nowadays, like, you look at that, because that was quite a while ago. It was prescient. It was like, why pay top dollar for convention space to announce a thing in an audience hall, that we don't really control. Maybe they don't like the AV situation. Most of their executives and most of their leadership are coming from Japan, so they're jet lagged, or they're not comfortable speaking English under pressure. Or there's the coordination, again, from an AV perspective, that like they have to have Bill Trinan or one of the Team Treehouse people who work at Nintendo of America standing up there with them to like live translate what they were saying. All of, as a control freak company, especially Nintendo, who like, they really want you to think of them almost like a toy maker. Like they want you to think about the brand instead of individuals making games, right? Like the opposite of whatever Hideo Kojima's relationship with Konami was when he was making the Metal Gear Solid games, is like, I'm an auteur, I'm a filmmaker wannabe. This is Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid. Nintendo wants to be the opposite of that. They've got Miyamoto, he made Mario, but over time, and even early on, like they didn't ship credits for games for a long time after the industry was trying to get them to, right? It's not like it's a unionized field. But I think that they like to be able to put stuff out as if video games come down from the ether. And so when YouTube started getting traction, it was not very long before Nintendo was like, yeah, fuck these big theatrical productions that are high pressure, where we don't have a lot of control, and where it like makes our people like Reggie Fils-Aimé, the at the time president of the Nintendo of America, turn them into big stars. Like we want to be more, direct to consumer, and it's really Nintendo speaking at you. So they started doing that pretty soon, 5-ish year time horizon. Sony and Microsoft both doing more of the same thing, or starting their own physical events. The ESA, which is the Electronic Software Association, I want to say, they were the ones responsible for putting on the E3 show. And the ESA as an organization is a trade association. They were, I think maybe they came around, and this is now just a stupid history lesson, but like I think that the ESA was formed around the time that Joe Lieberman was freaking out about Mortal Kombat and violence in video games in the mid-90s. And you have like Tipper Gore flipping out about like, wanting to censor records because of the gang violence, the thuggery of rap music. And that's how you got the explicit label on CDs. And it's how you had the MPAA, get tighter about rating movies. But the ESA kind of existed as an analog that was developed in the mid-90s to the MPAA, the Motion Pictures of America Association, I want to say. So the ESA was responsible then, it was so that they could avoid government regulation and the government stepping in and rating, age rating game releases. You had like the E for everyone, the T for teen, the M for mature, and the AO for adults only. And the ESA is responsible for that, for the rating system, basically. And so you as a game developer, individual publisher, even though you're paying dues in, and the big, console makers pay the most, because they kind of run the joint. The board is mostly stooges. But for each individual game, you pay some sort of fee to the ESA. They do the rating for you. It's a sort of certification process. It's a very ceremonial song and dance. Again, remember, they only exist to avoid regulation. So it's just like they got to have like the pretense of mostly these companies just rate their own shit. It's a far less, I think, buttoned up process than motion pictures ever were in terms of, oh shit, we said one too many fucks, and now that we're in an argument about whether it's going to be an R or PG-13, or we got to go make edits. I don't think that happens very much with games. So that's how this all came about, right? Like E3 and the rating system were both the domain of the ESA, but the relationship, kind of drifted. The people making the games were paying really, really high, like exceedingly high rates for very small booth space at the actual annual E3 show in Los Angeles. And they weren't getting that return on investment as things went online. As if they can just say something on YouTube, or if they can run their own event at cost and not be paying, hundreds of thousands of dollars for floor space. And by the way, floor space that now all of our competitors are just right across the aisle. And so we're clogging up all of the media channels, and we're all trying to like climb over each other to compete for airtime and for who's going to be on CNBC hits in the morning and who might actually get mentioned on the Today Show for this new console or hardware that got announced. It really made no sense. So slowly, as the larger publishers started backing away from E3 and doing their own thing, it created a vicious circle almost immediately where we could just see the writing on the wall. Like, this convention is going to go away, because when the big ones walk away, then the media attention isn't there. And if the media attention isn't there, then the mid-sized publishers aren't going to see that I need to invest more money. And then, of course, they did the thing that every convention or event does while it's in a death spiral, is that they started increasing prices, because like they have certain fixed costs. Like, they've got salaries to pay. The space is like the Los Angeles Convention Center is like it's a expensive place to rent. If you've got fewer exhibitors, and you still have, the venue is charging you the same amount of money, either you shutter and stop, or you start charging the people who are still left more money. And sure, you can give them like a palatial amount of space. Maybe they don't need it. And so when the prices go up and the value goes down, it doesn't take long for things to basically fold in on themselves. And the thing that really killed it was, to try to make money, they started selling tickets to the general public. This was a media and industry only event. Like, it was basically media, people making games, and then for some reason GameStop and Electronic Boutique and Software Etc., like that company, would send every store manager to the conference. And so it was like three groups of people, three very distinct types of people were at these things. And then a lot of my friends, like the aforementioned Brian and others who one who listens to the show at least, who I will not name because I'm not sure how excited he'd be about getting named, but I see you, would get to go to the conference. I keep saying conference because I never got to go. It's a convention. I really wish I'd taken the chance. I had an opportunity one year, but I was like 15 that year, and I was like, I don't think this is going to fly with mom and dad. So I didn't decide to try to find a way to miss school to be there. Anywho, E3, the ESA made it look like it was like, oh, well, because of COVID, we're not going to do this anymore. But once they tried to have it both ways and have it be like a media industry event and also have just like the general public there, because they had to sell tickets to somebody, so they generated the revenue that way. But like there was just not the physical plant to like have, you can't have game journalists in the same line as like the general public to play a game so they can do a write-up for a preview and then post it. And the lines would be like 3, 4, 5 hours long to get a 15-minute demo of a game, and snaking all over the place. It just made no sense, especially when you had other expos that were actually designed for the general public, like the PAX, the Penny Arcade Expo. So anyway, there's a lot of inside baseball about video game events, but E3 was near and dear to my heart as a kid who got video game magazines, because the May-June issues were always like bangers, like, because I told you what's going to happen for the next 7-8 months. And emotionally, I guess, like when E3 started to die, it made me sad, because that big news dump, that dopamine of like, yeah, let's see what's happening, what consoles are going to get announced, what hardware is coming, that you could rely on as being like around that time of year, sort of like, you like, it's exactly like these days, if you're into Apple hardware, in August, you're like, yeah, I'm excited to see these new iPhones. I know they've already leaked and I know everything about them, but like, this there's going to be some aspect of them that you don't really have a clear sense of. Like, I wonder how that camera control thing, that camera button's going to work. And so you build up some anticipation. But now this is not that way anymore. Basically, the big companies all just wait until they have news, and then on their schedule, they'll just throw up something on YouTube. And so it's almost like it sneaks up on you, and you're like, oh, whoa, shit, news happened. And sometimes it happens all at once, and sometimes you go a long time without any news. And so it's kind of a bummer. I was bummed when E3 went away. They tried to bring it back, but like the thing about it is like, seems like the ESA is not the best run organization since it only does two things. And all of their attempts to resuscitate it failed. Well, they're back. That's the news item. I realize it took me 10 minutes to get to it. But like, that's the news item. E3 organizer, the ESA, they launch a new event called, and then they finally got around to making a new event. And then they failed to spell it correctly. It's called Icon with 2 I's. Icon. Maybe, but like, it's the gaming industry where the last time we had anything with 2 I's in it, it was pronounced Wii, the Nintendo Wii, WII. So is it Econ? You know, it's the ESA, the successor to E3. You know, a lot of languages, they look at 2 I's, they see an E sound. Maybe it's Econ. I don't know. So yeah, they still seem incompetent. But anyway, their new Econ event is interesting to me because it's being pitched as a thought leader summit with keynotes, discussions, workshops for people in the industry, and covering all of interactive media, which is bigger than just video games, but also mostly video games. You know, they're saying that they have buy-in from Nintendo, Microsoft, Sony, Amazon Games, Disney, Electronic Arts, Epic Games, Square Enix, Take-Two, Ubisoft, Warner Brothers. I think that's pretty cool. I'm like, I see space for an event like that in the industry, that the Game Developer Conference, which is very technical and is awesome. I would actually love to go to that if I had at all an excuse, if I wasn't just taking up a seat of somebody who would actually be able to use that information. I've seen some amazing sessions there, but they're more technical and they're for practitioners. That's about the implementation. That's about the craft of making games, and much less on what's next, or like, you know, big ideas. Sometimes you get some of that stuff here and there, but it's not really what that event's for. DICE is another event that's kind of similar. It's much more technical, and it's about people. I think there's a bigger party scene at DICE, but it's not the kind of thing where high level executives necessarily across the board, or even just like director level people and VPs. They might show up to those to do business, but less so to actually collaborate. I could imagine an event like, who knows if this is going to work, but events where, you know, you might talk about opportunities for tooling. Like, let's say that, like, you know, like all sorts of tools exist in gaming, and very often when a need isn't met, what'll happen is medium and large publishers will reinvent the wheel separately and go a long time and say, like, well, this is an aspect of our custom, you know, version control system that we've been using forever, and you've got one over here. So for a long time, they all had just different record keeping, you know, different game engines, of course, but like all sorts of just stuff that's like commodity now, or should have been commoditizable. And eventually, you know, companies came in, they created middleware, they sold it to the different publishers. But a lot of times, you know, there's just people working in a vacuum. Like, everyone, like, what they're selling is games. They're competitors when it comes to games. But to make a AAA game, or to make any game at all, there's so many incidental other things that everyone else also has to solve, that laying down the weapons every now and then and coming together to collaborate and talk about, it's like, hey, you know, this aspect of game development, I picked version control because, like, the files are really big and they churn really often, and so Git, for example, is really bad for the gaming industry. Like, and large file system isn't good enough, and so there's all these other solutions that people have cooked up. That's an example of, like, I got, probably from their perspective, a solved-ish problem at this point. But, you know, let's talk about AI. Like, maybe there is a tool chain that you can wire up in your build system that is, like, you know, like, everyone's sort of hacking it together on their own, but like, if they came together, they could share, if nothing else, lessons learned, save each other a little bit of a headache, and like, hey, here's how to build that pipeline. And like, everyone wins because everyone gives and everyone takes. And the net effect is, collectively, we all get that much better, that much marginally better at focusing on what we really care about, which is building compelling games. Test Double did this in our little corner. So we're just a software consultancy, and all we did was figure out how to serve clients really well as a software consultancy. And we were in a group, or are in a group. I won't out it with a name. I won't talk about other members, but like, in a group of actually 2 different groups, at least now 3 in some sense, So we're really fans of it, I guess, of this concept. But other like-minded companies with similar businesses that we share something in common, either principles and values, Tugboat is one that I know we're publicly on a list of, and that's a larger one. Or we share like some operational similarities, like services-based software company. Or we are in a tighter group of consultancies that basically do the kind of custom software development work on contract that Test Double does. And in the one that I'm thinking of, we would meet every 6 months, and you had to have an ownership stake to show up at the table in the company. So it was mostly, for the longest time, it was mostly founders who were there. Now it's, some of the founders have stepped back from day-to-day operations. And so it's maybe executives and leaders. But the point is, you get the leaders in the room every 6 months, and you're like, maybe you as an individual company of 100 people, you've got 8 or 9 clients. You feel like you kind of have a pulse on how the market's going from your perspective, but that's still a pretty narrow view. You get 13 other companies all in a room every 6 months, and you benchmark a little bit, and you talk about what you're seeing over here, and maybe, it turns out in this vertical, in this industry, this person's having a lot of luck. Maybe that's something that we should be looking at. Maybe you're talking about hey, here's some new HR tools, or hey, we found that during the pandemic, right? Our clients are really struggling and figuring out how to do remote work, and we've been remote for a long time. So here's something that Testable, who's been remote first, that we can offer you. It's the kind of collaboration in any industry that I think just makes a ton of sense, because it's the shit work that distracts you from whatever the business exists to do, that just becomes this internal operations tax that you have to pay. And if you can spend time with other people, get some commiseration, make some friends, also have maybe a little, you can be competitive, but and have a rivalry, I guess. But by knowing your opponent, they become a little bit less of an enemy, right? At the same time, because you understand and you empathize. And that's separately good. So I don't know, maybe this event could be something like that for some number of people in the industry, and I think that would be great. So there you go. That's a hopeful thing. Good luck, ESA. On a totally different note, Apple has for the longest time made life difficult, I want to say, for a lot of dads out there. And maybe it's just because you need to have been using Apple stuff for at least 15 years for this to matter. Maybe longer. But before Mobile Me, call it .Mac, call it Mobile Me, in that era, 2005 to 2010, it was not always clear that you would necessarily need to care very much about Apple's backend cloud services. The email that existed wasn't very good. You could host a website if you used that iWeb app, but there weren't a lot of other features. Your photo library was all local. Most people did not subscribe to or use, and it was .Mac, iTools, I think, going way back, were all paid web services. So a lot of people just never used them. And maybe the first thing that some people signed up for them for was only after they got their iPhone. Maybe it was to do, maybe it was as late as iCloud starting, or whatever. Maybe they did it because they wanted to log into messages so they could use iMessage, right? So that whole timeline of actually trusting Apple for backend platform services came so much later than iTunes. iTunes was dominant in 2003. In 2004, because you'd buy a song for 99 cents. So people would create an iTunes account with an email address that was an external email address, because of course iTunes doesn't give you an email address. And so that would be one Apple ID. And then you'd sign up for .Mac or Mobile Me, and it would give you an email address by default. And so people would mostly do that, even though you could sign up for it with that exact same Apple ID that you'd actually just used on iTunes. But the UI was never clear about that. And so what ends up happening is a ton of people use their phone or their iPad, and they've got, they're logged into iCloud under one account, because that's been their iCloud account since forever ago. And then they have to go down to the medias and purchases and sign out of the iCloud account there, click it again, say, I'm not this person, and then sign into media and purchases as this secondary account that just happens to be whatever Apple ID they created when they first set up iTunes back in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7. If this isn't you, be grateful. If this is you, like, rejoice because there's good news. You have been forced to have this bifurcated 2 login system on every Apple device since the dawn of time, since any of this shit started to matter, because your purchases were all in one account and your data and your personal data and how people contact you is all in the other account. And why would you keep perpetuating that? Like, it's not by choice. It's because, like, well, if I forsake the first account so that it's all just consolidated on my iCloud account, it's like, well, then all my app purchases aren't accessible, right? Or all my music purchases or all my subscriptions. I have to rebuy all that stuff again because there's no way to transfer purchases until this week. Ta-da! That's the news item. So Apple is got a support article up about migrating Apple account purchases between accounts with the idea of a primary account, that is your iCloud account that you actually care about, and then a secondary account, which is where you purchased all your shit. Take a look at it. I'll share the link. If this is you, you've probably already heard of this. It's probably most notable because it's taken so fucking long, even though there's tons and tons of people who work at Apple who have this exact problem. It's taken a long time, and there's a lot of gotchas and there's a lot of exceptions to whether or not this is going to work for you. In particular, probably got to cancel all your subscriptions or let those lapse. If you've got music libraries in both, I heard that one doesn't work. So it might just have a bug, right? It might just say, hey, this is, Aaron tried it, just said, hey, these accounts are ineligible to do it. And it was not clear why. So hopefully they invest in whatever they need to kind of iron the kinks out. But I would say if this works for you, as soon as it works for you, get the fuck out of the secondary account, because life is short, man. I don't trust that this is going to stay around long, because this sounds like the sort of thing where it was probably years of work of renegotiating licensing deals coming up. It's actually an undoable process somehow. So like clearly they put a lot of thought into it. But as soon as this is done, whoever built it is probably going to go reassigned to something else as soon as it's stable. So the best time to use any Apple thing is like right after it releases, unless you have reason to believe it's buggy. So maybe the 0.1 release, but if you wait on this for 5 years, I wouldn't be surprised if it's broken again, and then definitely not going to get fixed. So I'm just glad to not be in that situation personally. Speaking of Apple data, we talked last time about this group kit thing and the imminent, which has since been announcement of an app called Invites from Apple. So Apple, now you go to the App Store, you can download the Invites app. I had such aspirations for this app that it could be basically like a Calendly killer or a Doodle killer or both, where you'd open the Invites app. It would use your iCloud account. It requires an iCloud Plus subscription, but so that you could have a website where you like schedule time with me, or you could pick out friends, like maybe this group kit thing. You would connect to messages and then have like your group chat and like pick out a time to hang out. It's much, much more simple, and it's kind of like silly. I mean, it looks nice. It looks like the new visionOS look, but it's kind of just, you pick out people, you give a name to an event, you give a picture for the event or whatever, you pick out a playlist that only works in Apple Music for the event. But like you can send the event out, and for Apple users, it's kind of one click. They go through the app and it's accepted. And for everyone else, there's this whole song and dance where they have to click a link in an email, and there's a PIN code, and then you gotta confirm it, instead of like having individual URLs that are sort of have tokens embedded in them, and each recipient gets separately. Like it's giving a lot of work to the people who are getting the invites, which is just the kind of design mistake you make if you built this whole thing in secret and you didn't test it very well on real fucking people outside of this, the Apple spaceship. So reviews have not been great. One of the things in these not so great reviews, however, is that just like the Journal app and the Sports Scores app, this also is a new app from Apple that only works on iPhone. And that means no iPad, no Mac, no Vision Pro, no Apple TV. And so you're thinking like, so their whole developer story right now is that we are reaching a point where with Swift UI, you build something for the watch, and then you can expand it to the phone. You deploy it to iPad, and with minor changes, you have the same UI code basically all up and down the stack of all of Apple's platforms. That's their developer story. Why would it be that they're regressing and launching new apps, not to all three platforms, not even to iPhone and iPad, but to just the iPhone? And for a period of 2 OS cycles, because Journal wasn't new this year, it came out last year with iOS 17. I've heard people pose the question in these negative reviews of invites, but I think the answer is kind of clear. It's clear to me at this point. It could turn out to be totally wrong, but if you look at those 3 apps I mentioned, if you look at Journal and you look at Scores or Sports Scores, whatever it's called, and you look at this new Invites app, I mentioned they look like visionOS apps. Like, that's a totally different design language. It's not like as radical as when iOS 6 went from full-blown skeuomorphic to full-blown I look like a Word document with different colors in iOS 7. It's not that dramatic. But this looks like these are UI controls that don't exist out of the box with any of Apple's developer tools. This looks like a new UI framework, a UI toolkit, I should say, of new types of controls. And this is how Apple might just for, so it might be design, it might be style. It's probably a little bit of every reason. For example, the reason that the UI looks that way on visionOS isn't just because like, hey, we're making this new visionOS. It's time to kind of reboot how we look, make all of our interfaces look. It's also, they needed very, very large, what we call like touch targets or click targets, like targets for your eyes to tap on stuff because the retina tracking isn't, precise enough. The retina tracking and the indirect pinchy pinch gesture you make in visionOS is very imprecise. And so you need really, really big and lots of space between controls so you can know what control you're looking at. And so that demanded a different visual style. Well, if you're going to have a totally different visual style in visionOS, and you want consistency across all these platforms, my suspicion all along since Vision Pro launched a little over a year ago, happy birthday, Vision Pro. My suspicion all along is that we're probably a year and a half out from Apple announcing some sort of new toolkit of new default controls that looks substantially more like visionOS and less like what we're used to in iOS. There's rumors going around that like the camera app is going to be significantly redesigned this fall. I suspect DubDub is going to be wild because we're probably going to see a full fresh coat of paint on all of Apple's stock apps on the basic operating system, the home screen, the lock screen. That's probably going to stay put because that's where most of the investment's been in like for 5 years now. They haven't really changed very much about the look and feel of the UI controls that go in and make your apps. And so as somebody who's kind of been on the sideline waiting to start work on a Swift UI application, every year there's always a reason to wait. But like this year in particular, it feels like, man, I'm going to keep the UI layer real thin and kind of mostly work right beneath the user interface because I suspect we're going to see a lot of new code for UI controls. So like, what's that got to do with this? Well, that means that like whatever the new UI toolkit that we're talking about is, whatever that is, it's probably got to be embedded in the app bundles. So that means that like these 3 phone apps probably have a lot of like a big old tarball of UI control bullshit just to make those particular apps look this new way. And after WWDC, after the new release of the next operating system comes out, that'll just be table stakes. It'll be part of the operating system. It'll be baked in and you can just use it. And that way apps can be thinner and lighter and only reference this kind of shared framework across all of the operating system. It would make sense to me to just get this stuff out the door on iPhone, iterate a little bit on it, get some testing, get some data on like how it's going, almost as just a die test to see like, hey, what do we need to change and update around this stuff? Because it's alpha mode, right? Like it's not even been announced that it is a toolkit. Maybe if they find that it's, usability, or if it's, they get certain customer satisfaction telemetry back that says, whoa, people do not like this. It's a way to safely test out this design metaphor with real people, get the data back and iterate, and then use that to inform the continued development of that toolkit for the other platforms, because it's probably just not ready yet. And so instead of figuring out a way to like make this toolkit portable across all the different apps right on day one, they're probably just starting with this very safe 2, 3, 4 apps that independently get launched, and then roll. You'll roll out next to this system-wide toolkit. Maybe it'll only support iPhone and iPad the first year, and then the second year maybe it'll come to watch. We'll see. But like, that's why I think that's the most interesting thing about the Invites app, in my opinion, if I had to pick. So there you go. That you can call that an official WWDC prediction right here, folks. Speaking of Vision Pro, some late breaking news that just actually hit the interwaves while recording. Apparently, looks like Bloomberg's Mark Gurman has another one of his bangers out there of Apple rumor shit. visionOS 2.4 is going to go in beta next week, and with it, it sounds like Apple's going to announce a media player app that is dedicated for immersive video. And if you've ever tried finding immersive video in the TV app in the Vision Pro, it's not a great experience. So I don't know what they'll call it, immerse or something. But supporting a place to just highlight specifically immersive video could act like a media store did for encouraging artists and cinematographers to start filling that up. Of course, it's all early days, it's a small install base, but the just burying it as a tab or as a filter criteria in the TV app, whatever the solution is, that's not it. Additionally, the update is said to improve guest mode, so you'll have the ability to hopefully, I think like basically not full-blown multi-user as in Macs, or just you can set up as many accounts on a Mac as you want, and they can all have. The only thing that multiple Mac owners cannot do on a Mac, if you've got like you and your family all share one together, like the good old days, is I believe only one Apple account can have Find My turned on as like the account that can like lock and erase the device. So that's the only extent to which there's like one primary account on a Mac. In general, it's just a multi-user system because it's Unix and that's how it was built in. And it's only since the iPhone era that we've assumed all of these Apple products are going to be just individual. And you could say that's because they want to sell more of them, but also it's just a design consideration that they haven't taken on. And I think they should for the iPad, frankly. But they definitely, it would be nice for a $3,500 headset if they did, but one could also see it from the perspective of, well, if it's going to be a $1,500 headset and you could only imagine it getting more custom tailored to your particular, glasses prescription like it does now, and like head shape and contours, like it's as a wearable, it's an even more personal device. So I would never expect to go full multi-user mode, but the Gurman report indicates that the guest mode is going to be more like other people in the family can theoretically put this thing on and enjoy it. Whereas right now, the guest mode, still 5-10 minutes to set up, but I think it can remember the last person. So when that person pops it on, I haven't even tried it because Becky has not expressed interest. And none of my friends, despite how much I talk about the Vision Pro, are knocking down my door to be like, hey, let me at that headset. 0 people have expressed that interest. And it might just be because they're afraid of getting my hair lice. But, I'm very clear. I'm always upfront about the hair lice. Maybe that's the issue. Google. Oh, right. The actual headline of the visionOS story is it's going to get Apple Intelligence. That's the headline. And then that's the thing Apple's going to push is like, look at now with Apple Intelligence. There's an M2 in it. There's 16 gigs of RAM in the thing. Like it can run Apple Intelligence. They just didn't get around to it from a software perspective. But of course, like, what's that? It's Genmoji and What are they going to do? Like make the whole fucking display like in like that little like ski goggle shape, like do the rainbows at you? You're gonna be like, am I stroking out right now, or did I activate Siri? I think the Siri interface is actually as like a 3D sphere in front of you is like pretty nice. I am very curious to see like what sort of hallucinations. Like, did I just fucking lick the back of a frog? Dingus, tell me like, where's the antidote? It'll be a fun color show. We'll see. I do not envy the UI designer who's, they've probably got B talent on the visionOS team. No, that's not fair. They're excited to have a new platform to build, but I would not want to be the guy who got assigned the task of making that weird full screen Apple Intelligence light up show be your whole face. Anywho, Google, they're making their own news. Not the kind you want. After the Gulf of America bullshit, they have apparently, people just had to notice this before they put out a blog post. They removed a bunch of holidays from the holiday calendar. The holiday calendar, I experience it. You might experience it. If you have any Google calendars, it's a calendar that's turned on by default and is infuriating. And then you figure out how to turn it off on every fucking Mac that you set it up on an iPhone, right? Because like Apple has its own calendar for holidays, and I don't want to see that it's Veterans Day 3 times in my calendar app. And so for each Google account, I dutifully go and turn off the holidays calendar. So I wasn't the one to notice this, but somebody logged in to their phone and they were like, wait a fucking minute. I'm scrolling ahead and Juneteenth isn't there anymore. And that's because Google has canceled your woke ass holidays. That's not what their blog post says, but it looks like during the era of kowtowing and caving to every single employee so that, everyone could feel included and stuff from the perspective, I'm not saying it. That's Google saying it. They had a permissive, let's just add all of the holidays everyone wants. Let's make sure every holiday that anyone feels strongly about, except for the silly ones, like they didn't put in the hot dog day or the, donut day or Fat Tuesday, which is frankly, I am extremely observant when it comes to Punchki Day. I don't need any of this groundhog shit. I just need, punchkis, poochkis. As a Michigander, I should remember how to pronounce that because there's a large Polish population. But they're basically donuts, but if you made a filled jelly donut 3 times worse for you somehow. And that's what we celebrate on Fat Tuesday in the traditional way. That one never showed up. Where were you all then? Right? Looking out for Fat Tuesday representation. Anywho, Google yanked a bunch of holidays because they're like, well, we had too many of them and we had complaints or whatever. It's not like the servers couldn't fit that many holidays. That it was too cluttered. And so we've pared it back to just sort of like a more official list of they're not going to say real holidays, but that's kind of what they're suggesting. So, but at least they picked a month to do this where, traditionally marginalized communities of people aren't already feeling like they're getting kicked in the nuts or genitals or areas. Sorry. So when I saw this news story hit, it reminded me of back when continuous integration was new for software teams. That is to say, you have your source, everyone's got their source code on their machines, and there's a build that runs a series of tests to say this build that Justin just pushed, green, it passes the test. And it's almost like you get to, yay, my code, because I maybe only commit once a day or every other day. It's like, yeah, my code worked. It integrated with the other code. It ran all the tests. It passed. Good. Well, like that's a high stress thing because like we were also innovating at the time in the industry. And, every time the build failed, it would be like, red alert. We don't know how seriously to take this or if it's bad, but like we're going to make a big deal out of it. And then you'd see teams develop all of this just not so great behavior, like identify who broke the build. And it's like everyone in the company gets an email and be like, Joe broke the build. Everyone go find Joe. Where's Joe at? And then you have like the VP of engineering, like open his office door and come out and, like go to Joe's computer and be like, do you know what you did? That kind of behavior was common. What's this got to do with calendars? Well, For Joe, that's a real bad day. But for the 36 other people who've been waiting to push their code because they've been shitting razor blades out of fear that they'd be the one to break the build, right? All it means is like some tests failed. So like that's a good thing, right? Like it shouldn't, if you're not a programmer, if you haven't had this experience, the correct reaction to a broken build is, oh, that's too bad. Let's all, let the person fix it or ask if he wants help fixing it so he can fix the test, push it again, and then the build will pass. And that's it. No harm, no foul. But when you raise the stakes, like shining a spotlight on the person and blaming them and doing like a post-mortem on like, why did you push code that didn't work to our sacred garden of really nice code? When you have that culture, and it was very quick to develop that culture because red seems bad and failure sounds bad. And the one thing you know about corporate America is if failure is not acceptable because we need to be making progress. We need to be winning. We're winners here, So all the Glenn Ross alpha male energy just kind of rains on down. Shit rolls downhill, right? And so like, as a consultant, I always knew these companies from a mile away, right? It's like this culture starts at the top. Fish rots from the head. As a consultant, I also have a lot of expressions about companies run by assholes. So, look. What happens immediately after Joe breaks the build? Let's say I'm a developer on this team and I know that the average build break, because the tests are slow, takes, and there's only one thing running the build. And there's only one monolith. This is before Git. This is before we all had branches running builds in all these different systems all over the place, all simultaneously. This was just one trunk in Subversion or in CVS. And you could pull it and you could push it. And you'd pull it down and you'd merge your changes with whatever just happened and then you'd push it back up. And you could make branches, but like that was really expensive. We just didn't do that very much back then. So let's say Joe breaks the build. If it's going to take a day and a half, like, what do we do? Does all work stop? And the answer could be like, well, we check in only so often. So if the build's broken, I'm not going to pull right now. I'm going to let them fix it. But something else you could do that a lot of people did was, well, I have to get this feature delivered. I have to be able to say that I delivered it. I've been waiting to push for 3 days. It's literally like, I got to take a shit, but I'm afraid that someone's going to hear me in the bathroom. And now I'm constipated and like, oh man, my belly's distended. Is that bad, right? I got to get this out of me. But if I don't know, to stretch the analogy, if I shit on the floor, like I'm going to get in trouble. So like you're holding it in, unhealthy. If once the build's broken, it can't get super broken. It can't go from red to redder. And so, I assume a lot of people of that era saw this behavior. But in that kind of environment, I saw this independently. It's like how all of these different species of animal have separately evolved into things that look and behave like crabs, but they don't behave. Carson something, like it turns out that the crab is just the ideal form of organism. It's not the xenomorph alien from the Alien series. It's like everything just becomes crabs. So this is a behavior that I saw emerge totally independently at least half a dozen companies. Well, if I'm sitting next to Joe and Joe just broke the build and everyone's looking at Joe and the build is currently in a broken state and I have to get my shit out because I've been holding it in, guess what I do? I push on red. The whole point is you don't push on red. You don't push up your probably working code, hopefully working code, to that continuous integration server while it's in a known, untrusted state. Because when you push it up and it's in that failed state, well, the tests are going to still fail, but we won't know, are they failing because they used to be failing because Joe broke the build? Come on, Joe. Or are they failing because Joe broke the build and also you would have broken the build? So now we're broken for two reasons, except it's not just me who just had that idea. It's 20 other fucking people on the floor. And so then all of a sudden, I'd see clients where you'd see zero activity happen on source control for days in these sort of environments where there's like an authoritarian, top-down, command and control, bullshit, toxic masculinity, adjectives, and so forth culture. Days with no one pushing any code to that server to the version control because it would kick off a build and they would get bopped on the head if the build failed. And then all of a sudden the build fails one time. And before Joe has time to fix it, 35 other fucking people have pushed all of their code up. And, testing was still a new practice. Most people weren't running the tests all locally. Very often the tests that you could run locally were a different set of tests than what you could run in an integrated environment because you weren't just running a full stack of everything because there's all these old systems and other kind of integration tests and stuff that could only be run. Maybe you only have one licensed Oracle e-business, right? And that lives on the continuous integration servers environment, not in your development environment. 35 people all post a bunch of code that probably doesn't work simultaneously. And now, because those old version control systems are not so easy to tease apart change sets after the fact. They're not distributed. There's just this one canonical thing. You can push and you can pull. So now you'd see that teams like that would then be like, all right, well, the next month of our lives is going to be trying to get this build to go green again. And me as the consultant who specialized in testing, I was glad that I charged hourly, right? And you could explain to people so many times, this is actually a process issue, right? Like when the build is broken, people should not be doing this. I never thought to actually put a safeguard in that would reject pushes to version control, but the version control systems at the time were so archaic and limited that it was never a feature that you could just check. Maybe there's some proprietary one out there. Maybe Perforce could do it. I don't know. But you could tell them, you'd talk to all 35 of those developers and be like, this is bad. This is just going to cause you collectively all significantly more pain. And they would either already know or be easily convinced. But the behavior wouldn't change because it was the boss or the grand boss or the overall company vibe that was so blame focused, right? And so unaccepting and intolerant of anything called failure, anything that looked red on a dashboard, anything that didn't look like excellence and safety and forward momentum. If you could put a name next to those negative feelings, that person was going to have a really bad time. That person wasn't going to get an exceeds expectation on their job performance revert. Well, Joe, you launched an application that's making the company billions of dollars, and you did it on time, and you actually were able to marshal together 15 different departments to make all of this happen. But Joe, do you remember that time in February where you missed a fucking semicolon and then you hit push? Joe, why'd you have to do that to us? Why? I thought you cared. I thought you were serious. So that's what I thought of when I saw Google decide that this is the week that they're going to change the calendar. It's there's probably been directors and executives who've been sitting on this one for months or years. And they're like, the calendar's a problem, right? Our customer satisfaction is going low because people haven't even heard of half of these fucking events, right? 90% of people are unsubscribing from this calendar or using Google Calendar less, right? We've got data that says as a product, our product is worse for being so inclusive with these calendar events that many people think are nonsense. We need to pare it back. And if you wait until Elon Musk goes and just starts tearing down entire agencies of the government, firing tens of thousands of people. The news is, I've not been following the news, but I know that much. I'm sure the news is full of all sorts of stuff. Whereas if this had happened 9 months ago, this would have been a 2-day news cycle and would have been covered in the nightly news. It was Google's making an anti-woke whatever. Google's pushing on red, right? And then we're seeing a lot of companies decide now's maybe the moment on a Friday evening to put out a press release, say, hey, we're not going to do this one anymore, right? So yeah, this is taking a situation that's already kind of bad and intentionally exacerbating the problem for one's own personal, convenience, even if the collective whole suffers as a result. So good job, Sundar. Way to go. You guys are just fucking crushing it. because you just can't get your heads out of your asses. Google has been such a fucking mess of a company for so long. They don't know why they are what they are. They never understood how they make money, and they organized around everything except for the thing that makes the money. And so nobody should be surprised when they suddenly get bad at everything, because they existed on stupid money. It was earned in a sense, but like when you don't know why your company makes money and your company is not organized to maximize the amount of money that your company makes, that is to say, we make ads by showing or we make money by showing ads on searches. And then when you click the links on those searches, we show more ads that we sell as inventory and an auction house and like all that stuff. But like when they bought DoubleClick, they just like kept those fuckers in a random building in Chicago and like treated them like third-class citizens, because their real engineers were the ones farting around with, scooters and stuff out in Silicon Valley, making 4 times as much money and doing absolutely nothing to contribute to the company's revenue. And then those are the people who now, 10 years, 15 years after that, are all in leadership. So good job. Way to go, team. In other news, speaking of pushing on red, Google and Apple have put TikTok back in the App Store after the Department of Justice wrote them a very nice letter saying, we promise not to, indict you or to exact, I think what was it, $5,000 per user per year, maybe per some term. Fine. It's a fine if it's the government doing it. Fine if for every user that downloads the app, we're going to, we declare sanctuary. You can do that now. And you don't ever signed me, right? The problem is like, that's not binding. And also there's a 5-year statute of limitations. So the administration could change and the next administration could just punitively decide to like lord over Apple and Google. But if I'm thinking of like, who's a unitary executive who would love to be able to lord over Tim Cook and Sundar Pichai, it's probably the current one. So they can send this letter and then Apple and Google do it. And now it's like, well, technically by having this thing back in the App Store, technically, if we did choose to enforce this, you'd be on the hook for hundreds of billions of dollars already, right? Based on the number of people who download these apps, TikTok specifically. Yeah, that sounds like great blackmail bait. I can see why everyone was so eager in the Trump administration to get this thing back in the App Store. I cannot quite see why Google and Apple caved, other than right now, if you're not playing ball, you're catching a lot of flack, and they would rather be seen as playing ball. The problem is that I think this is a one-way road. I don't think, I could imagine Elon getting kicked out of there and his life going to shit at this point, because he's coming at the king in a way. But like when a tech company kowtows like this and they debase themselves and hand over something like this gigantic financial liability over as a pledge of fealty or something, even if it's just, a short-term thing, probably doesn't matter, probably won't amount to anything. Like, that tends to be the kind of thing that perpetuates, that it's going to be like, well, like it's going to be a slippery slope of, well, like we could probably hold our ground on this one, but if we do, maybe he'll, reverse that DOJ, memorandum and suddenly come after us. And if he does that, then, So cool. Well, there was some exciting news. Something I was genuinely so excited. I was on my iPad at night and I was about to fall asleep and I saw this one pass by. I was like, oh my God. Yes, finally. Yes. This is my white whale. Netflix is in the Apple TV app. Yes, Netflix. Like you go to the up next queue and you see all of your shows from Apple TV and the ones from Prime Video and the ones from Max and the ones from Disney and the ones from Hulu and the ones from Paramount Plus. Everybody's there. One unified place to see what am I watching, when did it come out, in what order, so I can just turn on my fucking Apple TV, go to the TV app, and then know like pretty much what's up next. That's why they call it that. But the one person, companies are people, my friend. The one company that has refused to play ball in the Apple ecosystem. They say because they don't want to share data because the data is proprietary. And of course, sharing that playback information with Apple would tell Apple some pretty strong signals of like what the wealthiest demographic of users in the planet are spending their time on, because it's all about, you got to track the what you're watching and when, and what the progress is on all of these shows. And Netflix wants to keep that data to themselves. Well, all of a sudden, the subreddits around Apple stuff were like lit up, be like, whoa, it just asked me to connect my Netflix. Whoa, Netflix shows are showing up in the TV app. Whoa, my up next queue has Netflix in it. They must have finally come to some sort of agreement. Netflix must have caved. And my first thought was, and I added it to this list, was maybe they caved because Justin canceled his Netflix subscription. Because I did. And why did I do that? Because I never know what's fucking on Netflix. And I start watching a show and then I forget about the show because, drum roll please, it's not in the up next queue, because I'm one of those people who lives that way. And I suspect there are dozens of us. Like, right into the show and say, like, do you actually use the Apple TV? What's up next? What's up, Doc? Podcast at Searls.co. I would love to know, just like, because this audience is people that are more likely to be like me than man on street. If you watch Netflix less because it's not in this interface, like, and Netflix is experiencing some subscriber churn right now. Anyway, I was really excited. If I sound less excited than I did just all of 5 minutes ago, it's because the next day we all wake up, we're at the post, Apple Netflix nuptials orgy. We're all drunk as hell. I wake up in a stupor. I grab my phone, excited to open that TV app and then check out what's happening between, my Netflix shows and my Paramount Plus shows. What am I going to watch next? Is it going to be Yellow Jackets? Or I can't even think of a name of a Netflix show because I don't watch any fucking Netflix because it's not up next. But I was there. I was looking. And there's no more Netflix stuff. Because we woke up to a news story where Netflix is like, oh, my bad. That was an accident. That was a mistake. We didn't actually change our policy on that. So, cool. So even the good news isn't good news. What a time to be alive. John Gruber over at Daring Fireball, he covered this. I ran into it as well. There's WikTok. Somebody made in like 90 minutes. So social media chatter back and forth. Hey, instead of TikTok rotting your brain, what if we rotted our brains with Wikipedia random articles? And Wikipedia's always had the random article link, as long as I can remember. And they said, well, what if we just put a TikTok interface? So you're scrolling through vertically different Wikipedia articles, and you're wasting time by learning shit. Great idea, said somebody else on the internet on a social media app, and then spent 90 minutes using Claude from Anthropic to help scaffold it out and build a prototype of the app. And the headline, right, is like, took like 90 minutes, basically worked. It's a Vercel app, so it was posted straight to the cloud, and Vercel makes it really easy to post JavaScript apps. Very, very, it gives you the railway to kind of go straight to cloud from desktop. And it was just so fast. And because part of the story was it was like AI generated. The doomsayer friends of mine have been a little bit extra doomsayery generally, but I think even just the sort of commentariat, it was such a stark example of thing that didn't exist, thing that did exist. 2 hours had elapsed. AI was involved. And then because it was maybe 2 a.m. is when it launched, everyone's like, takes a breath. And then they're like, oh God, our programmer is getting replaced. And incidentally, what I'll say is creating something that kind of works from nothing is maybe the easiest thing a programmer can do, especially when the reason you're doing that is you're starting a brand new thing as opposed to trying to answer a question. There's two reasons as a programmer I start new things. One is, in Agile, we called it a spike, is like, I want to know, like, is it possible to use this, let's call it the old school Twitter API. Can I use the old school Twitter API with this new service called X? So like, because I don't know the answer to that question, I could just build onto my existing app on the assumption that I'll make it work somehow. All of that like kind of boilerplate code that I would need to eventually get to the point where I test that API. But that's a lot of work if ultimately the answer to my question is no. Well, then I got to revert all that shit. I wasted time. So I start a new thing when I perform a spike. That's like a little research project. It's like, all right, I'm going to give myself half a day. I'm going to give myself 2 hours. Sit down, answer the question, and I'm going to write just enough code in a fresh blank slate. Maybe it's a new project, maybe it's a new file, maybe it's a command line interface, something lightweight. I'm going to create a new thing just to test a hypothesis. And when I get the answer to the question, then I will have failed or passed the spike. And then I can go and implement it for real in the existing app. So that's one reason you make a new thing. The other reason you make a new thing is it's a toy. It's a little simple thing. It's standalone. It integrates with other stuff. Other things are doing the work. And so it's just not, it's not serious. There's not stakes because there's no users. There's not like data persistence and other things that there's a risk that like data might get corrupted or lost that somebody is really relying on, because there's nothing. It's day zero. It's brand new. And even if it's not a toy, even if this is going to be like, if WikTok is going to be like a serious app, because there's nothing there yet, you can still just throw together some shit and see if it works. Because at that point, when nothing exists, the difference between a spike to answer a question and a prototype, a bare bones prototype like this, they serve the same purpose. It's to answer the question, can I do this? Right? That's the question that you're asking when you first start something from scratch. Can I make this? Can I throw it away? Can I throw it together? So AI is really, really good with these sort of low stakes blank slate problems, because I wrote about this last June. I wrote an article called like the 3 rules for dating my LLM or using my LLM. It's really, really useful to use an LLM when you don't really care about the specificity of the results. Like there's a lot of right answers to the question, then whatever the LLM spits out is probably going to be fine. If you are operating from a place of like a lack of knowledge, like you don't know something, if you don't know something well, the LLM is going to do it pretty well compared to what you know it, right? Like, so that makes sense. And then are you asking a thing that like is extremely normal, is like just very like, it's not, changing the world. It's not 2 standard deviations removed from the mountain of training data that says every other website looks like this. You're not going over here. It's like, I'm going to build like a thing that's totally unlike anything else that ever existed. Most of these things, most new things in general are like, I want to, take A and plug in B, and no one's ever exactly done that before. And so I just want to plug these 2 in. In this case, I want to plug in Wikipedia, which is a very known quantity, and this TikTok-like interface, which is a very known quantity. And then LLMs are great for that kind of thing. And so I'm sure it flowed pretty quickly, right? And that's great. And it is great. So like if you get paid a full salary to put together little throwaway prototypes like this, yes, AI is coming for your job. Full stop. That's not why software developers charge a lot of money. It's not why we have so many of them. We have so many of them because the need for software developers scales with the number of really hard, thorny, complicated edge cases where the stakes are really high, right? Where it's like, it's an insurance company, and if you fuck up one number, it's like, that's the difference between profitable and lawsuits, right? Pharmaceutical company. It's like, oh, you fuck up one little base pair there, and it's like, oh, and now this thing that was supposed to save lives ends them, right? So specificity tends to be really important when there's dollars involved, high dollars or long established businesses, and the speciality of the knowledge then might only there are questions to COBOL questions and mainframe questions that might only have ever affected Nationwide Insurance or Chase Bank, that no one else in the world is ever going to need. And so as a result, the specialized knowledge there is not going to be represented by the foundational model's knowledge, because it wasn't in any of the training data. And even if you layer on, here's a copy of our entire repository, like those models are always going to be pulled towards the mean. It's why I find these tools useless for pros, right? For just writing like one of my newsletters, for example. I try every time. I tried it with O3 Mini this last time around. It's like, here's my outline. Here's literally, I think, 150,000 words of stuff that I've written relatively recently. Do your best to write this like I would. And it was so shamefully bad. It was hilariously bad. It was unfunny. It was poorly structured. The pacing was wrong. It kind of missed the point. It was just very blasé slop that looked like, every BuzzFeed article ever. And guess what it was trained on, right? Every BuzzFeed article ever. Not on mine. You can add all this extra context on top and all these qualifications, but like at the end of the day, our LLMs and our foundation models, especially the really big ones, the more parameters, the more kind of hues to the center, it's like they are very normcore. And so the companies that are spending a lot of money on software, they're doing it because they don't have any other option. It's because it's a specialized thing. You have to move really, really slowly. It's super complicated. The stakes are enormous. Nothing that we've seen so far since ChatGPT came down from heaven with 3.5 turbo and graced us with its presence, nothing that we've seen in the evolution of this whole field since then has yet convinced me that the end game results in these things having surgical precision for like really, really important business critical tasks. They're good at like being a primer for a topic that you don't know. They're good at starting from nothing at the blank slate, making some progress. They're good at reviewing big complex change sets, pointing out potential things, just like it's good at pointing out typos. But like if you're walking around this world and you see the WikTok thing and you're like, well, I guess software is done. I guess we fixed it all. If we end up with like software developers making less money, or if we end up with way fewer software developers in employment, it's going to have more to do with changing social norms about how big teams should be, how much they should be paid, and more to do with structural economic reasons, like the death of the traditional, VC-backed startup pump and dump scheme that I've talked about recently. And less to do about like the AI is actually making better software than humans now. God help us if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. I'm pretty confident about that one. And I've got no horse in that race, dog in that fight. That dog won't hunt. Now my brain is just full of random former client isms that live there, just business jargon. I don't need it. Next up, Jeep. Stellantis owns Jeep. I'm still not used to Stellantis being like not a medical device or prescription drug. Stellantis is a conglomerate that owns a lot of... Are you a conglomerate if you're only in one industry? It's an agglomeration, there we go, of a lot of different car brands around the world. The death of Chrysler results in, there's the Fiat merger, all these different, whatever. So Stellantis is like, their whole software story has been fucked for a long time. They're trying to get it less fucked. Their EV story, similarly in a state of fuckery. They are trying to modernize and they just can't put on their shoes straight, and they keep fucking it up left and right. So one of the things that like the big three automotive makers, like Mary Barra, especially at GM, what they've been intimating, what they've been hinting at is that they want to have a platform play. They want you to be either spending money because they own the car's software stack, and so like they're the exclusive provider of apps. They want to make 15, 30% off your Spotify subscription, right? Spotify just can't catch a break. If you want to have a native Spotify player in the car. And they are all looking at Tesla and they're all looking at Rivian and being like, man, we want it like those guys. We want that kind of control. And they imagine a world where we have full self-driving vehicles, supervised or unsupervised, where while you're in the car, something's got to happen. So then they're thinking about advertisement-based video on demand or passive ads that show up on a heads-up display or on the windows or whatever, right? They're horny for this. Well, Jeep stepped in it because they had we don't know if it was a bug or whatnot. This is, it's a big issue because I read it because somebody was linking to Slashdot. I haven't seen a Slashdot link in a long fucking time. So Jeep, apparently, every time you brake to the vehicle, every red light, you would see an advertisement for an extended service plan that you could purchase. Even though that extended service plan was only purchasable if it was like, the vehicle was under 36,000 miles. So theoretically, if you were over 36,000 miles, you're not eligible for the plan, but the software would still show you the ad anyway. If you already had the plan, the software didn't know that you already had the plan, but it would show you the ad anyway. Super duper lazy. Let's just use this as a billboard because it's free space and we own it. And there's nothing else on the screen anyway because you're braking. That set off so many alarm bells around like the people who think with brains classes of being like, this seems bad. So like that was a step too far, but it's like step number 35 in that direction with Stellantis this year. That really has a lot of people wondering like, how long for this world are they? Their reputation is absolute horse shit across almost every metric. I can tell you, like, over in my Tesla, where I'm now paying $99 a month for full self-driving and $9.99 for a premium internet package, which I don't know if that's required, but like it seems like a lot of shit doesn't work very well without it. The car never prompted me for that shit. In fact, I was like scrambling on my phone to find, how do I give you money for this? Because the whole reason I bought this is to have these features. Like, it's okay to own the platform. It's okay to charge for services, but only if like the services you're providing are so valuable that it's a reason for people to buy the car, like full self-driving or like a really good internet package that updates all the maps continuously and does all the other things, right? If your idea is, well, these dummies, they go to a dealership, they buy a car the old-fashioned way. Now they're a captive audience. They are prisoners, and we're going to extract dollars from them, and we'll make the number go up because we already make this many dollars from just selling cars. But what if we could put a little pepper on top in services revenue on top, just like Apple's been able to do? Then our stock price will go up. And because I'm an executive, all I care about is the stock price going up. That is the level of thought that I think has been given to this. And if it tanks our reputation, that's fine, as long as my shares are vested or I've moved on by then. No one's thinking about like consumers as having like actual agency or thoughts, or that the reputation of these companies is a thing. And so the audacity of this particular Jeep one was just so extreme that I think it might be a little bit of a wake-up call, if not to Stellantis, then to the other makes, to realize like, oh yeah, maybe we should be hesitant about putting this shit forward. Now, if it happens, the way it's going to happen is not a traditional automaker who you pay $80,000 for a Suburban or whatever, the old-fashioned way. It's going to be, what's that television service that like they sell a TV and it's got an extra bar to just show you ads, and if you try to cover up the bar, like it's a separate LCD, you try to cover it up, it has sensors to like detect, oh, they're trying to block this ad. Physically, they're putting a blanket over this ad, and like they won't show you the TV. And the reason is that they offer the TV for free or near free, or maybe you pay shipping or whatever. Why would anyone do that? Like, why would anyone subject themselves to mandatory advertisements and all these, experiences and retail opportunities as part of their TV? Well, the answer is they're getting something too. They're getting the hardware for free. Like, that's going to be what this looks like. It's going to be, an automaker who comes out and says, here's an EV. It's basically a golf cart with walls. Sure. But it's free. And all you got to do is watch ads while it drives you. Like, it's not going to be some surplus value for the traditional model of we're selling you really expensive vehicles and then we're also asking you to bend over. But, can't blame someone for trying. Last year, and it got kind of lost in the shuffle because there was a Godzilla movie happening, Kong vs. Godzilla 2 or whatever the fuck in the West, when Godzilla -1 was just picking up steam at theaters. They had to yank it and then shut up about it and not put it on digital distribution because of a weird rights contract thing with like the Japanese made Godzilla movies that Toho produces and the Western ones by Legendary that they make that are bad. Don't watch those ones. And so it really kneecapped Godzilla -1's worldwide take and attention. So like if you're like a person who follows movies closely, it was really goddamn good. In fact, the last two Toho Godzilla movies have been phenomenal. Shin Godzilla is still my favorite because it's a satire of the bureaucratic, slow-moving mess of Japan, and how a slow-moving monster in Godzilla would somehow manage to still outpace the arcane and convoluted bureaucracy. This next one, Godzilla -1, is fortunately, it's a reboot. They decided not to make a sequel to Shin Godzilla they'd been planning, and instead they rebooted it, and now it's like World War II era, the first, a sort of period appropriate look at like how Godzilla might have materialized, because it was a post-war construct mentally. It's like, what if all this nuclear radiation created a monster to wreak havoc on the world for what we have done, right? Godzilla -1, I think, is probably like from a film perspective the best version of that we've seen, because it's got that moral undercurrent to it. Well, it's getting a sequel. We don't know anything else. IndieWire, maybe Deadline, they reported it's getting a sequel. That's cool. I would watch that. I think Godzilla -1 might still be on Netflix, but who's to say, because the up next thing doesn't work and the universal search isn't there. So let's see. You hear that there's going to be a Godzilla -1 sequel, you get excited for it, and then you're like, so is it called Godzilla 0? Is it Godzilla -2? Are we going backwards? I'm very eager to find out. Now, it would be pretty cool if it was Godzilla -1 2. But I'm Godzilla +1. So it's really is like, maybe, is 0 a number? We're going to finally find the answer to that question. Last item I pulled. Wall Street Journal did a very long piece, a very good piece, about the Disney parks and how the price hikes are not only turning off consumers, pulling the average family that can afford to go to the parks upward. So from it used to be the case that 75% of Americans would go to Disney World or Disneyland at some point in their life. And now you look at like they've got some really cool visualizations of the costs, and like for different levels of budget, how much of their annual vacation budget would it require to even, at the lowest level, go to the parks, and how it's going up. And so now granted, like attendance is still near sellout numbers most of the time, and they're able to keep cranking that dollar figure up, and they're taking home those profits. It's just like basic elastic supply demand. But also, like, in terms of the upsells available, like, it's clear that Disney is happy to do what every industry seems to be doing, which is go after whales and extract more money for with higher ticket experiences and products. Much fancier merchandise and much more expensive dining and special events and all that stuff. This article is good because it's a good summary of, like, to me it's banal because this is like, I'm too close to it. It's right over there, is where it is. My house borders Disney's property, literally. So I've been passively observing a lot of the stuff and hearing a lot of scuttlebutt for a while. But, Disney can, the thrust of the article, if you really read it, and I think it's interesting. My friend Len Testa from Turing Plans, who maintains a bunch of data, they're a great place. If you do plan a trip, they can help you figure out how to, in a cost-efficient and a time-efficient way, just make sense of the complexity that has become theme parks and theme park vacations. Turing Plans provided a lot of the data for this, including those visualizations for this article. And if you read it, looking at just the numbers and how it's becoming a luxury good, it's becoming an experience that only the upper middle class can afford. And then you think about all of the guilty as charged here, adults who don't have kids who are enjoying the parks. Well, what happens when they age out, right? If you've got a smaller group of people going to the park who are upper income, and then a growing group of millennials, right, and Gen X people who are spending a lot of money at the park as adults without kids. Where is the next generation of kids that are going to come behind us to have all this nostalgia? Because like those theme parks to a large extent are a nostalgia play. Who is having the child? Like if fewer children are having the childhood that makes them feel nostalgia. Ah, yes, this is the place that I could go with my family. Everything's taken care of. Dad's finally not stressed out of his gourd. We had all these little moments. Maybe it was the only place I felt really safe and carefree because we had like lived in a situation. Our home situation wasn't great. Whatever it is that leads people to be 40 or 50 years old and have this tremendous affection for this company or this place. If fewer children are getting that experience, again, 10, 15, 20 years, it's just like the short-term versus long-term thinking problem that GM, Stellantis, and these car companies are facing. We'll see, right? So check it out. I'll share the link. Support the Wall Street Journal for this article alone. Yeah, so thanks to Len for that. I thought it was really, really good. And that does it for the news. Got a few things to recommend this time around. First, an individual YouTube video that just showed up in my recommendations and I chose to watch it. It was about work games. Games that either are about the experience of work, which are often satirical or funny, like Job Simulator, right? Or Stanley Parable. Or games that feel like work, in that like you do a task repeatedly, get better at the task, and then amass more resources and stuff. And I'm a sucker for both games, and I always have been. So I felt kind of personally attacked. But if you aren't the kind of person who's necessarily drawn to a truck driver simulator or like Power Wash Simulator, a lot of these are simulators, or games where you get to like, run an arcade, right? And then you have to like, clean the gum off the floors and collect the coins from the arcade machines like you do in Arcade Paradise. This might be a window into the particular rottenness at the core of my being. Why do I like these games that are just, they feel like a job because they're basically you doing a job? It's not rocket science, but the video summarizes it, shows a great smattering of the games, and describes things like, if you feel a lack of control by day over your life, if you feel a lack of autonomy, and if you can't tell, I'm somebody who really craves autonomy. The times when I was playing these games were times where my work life robbed me of that autonomy. That's when I would double down, just go hide and play Elite Dangerous and just do space trucking, min-max the economy so that I'm just like running floppy disks from one system to another one so that I can buy slaves. It's a thing. Slaves are one of the commodities. You don't see them. They're just in a spreadsheet. So there's no one's really harmed here. But, this one company, you look at the trade routes, one space station, they've got a purchase rate. They're willing to buy those floppy disks at a real high price. And then they got a fire sale on slaves, and you got a cargo hold. You drop off all the floppy disks. You got to put some in the cargo hold, or it's money you're leaving on the table. It would be worse if you left those slaves there, frankly. You should find them a better home that wants them, that's going to charge an appropriate amount of money for those space slaves. That's terrible. Slavery is bad. This is a joke. But like, seriously though, like when you're flying, you've got illicit goods like drugs that are illegal, like certain systems, you go in, they'd scan your cargo, and then you'd go to space jail, I imagine. But I never did because I was good. So you get to where you're going, you sell those things. And so anyway, when I talk about brokenness, that's what I mean. That like I could, inside the context of a video game, it's like, there's certain things where you see it depicted in a game. It's like, well, you should know better than to do that, to exhibit that behavior, even if it's simulated, even if it's a game. It's like, well, If it's just a spreadsheet, no one's really harmed. In fact, one thing we've learned about humans is that, and we're learning it right now, is like if I'm just deleting a row from a spreadsheet, if it has a human cost, I can't see that right now, so I'm not going to think about it. Anyway, good video about that particular phenomenon that I will link in the show notes. I forgot the name of the person or what it is. There you have it. I've talked a bit before about how I like the game the show Letterkenny and Shoresy, and that sort of Canadian hockey attitude. And there's a lot of fighting in Letterkenny specifically, and Shoresy, of course, is a hockey show. I'm not a huge Hockey the Sport fan, but there was a beautiful time, like EA's NHL 94 was like the one of these. A crack team made a badass fucking 16-bit era NHL hockey game. And there have been a handful of other good hockey games over the years, but like that caught some magic, that particular game. And there's a documentary about the making of that game and where things fell back off the rails and how it came about. But anyway, I think that hockey lends itself really, really well to video games. It's fast paced. There's not like a start stop of the action. There's not a ton of penalties to worry about. There's fights. Anytime that the other team has control, it's not like soccer where it's like, well, I'm on the other side of the fucking field, so I'll just try to, and then you're gas and 20 seconds have passed before you get the ball back. That's why like the best soccer games are like Sega Soccer Slam and Mario Strikers and stuff like that more arcadeify it. It's like the Blitz football equivalent of soccer. But with hockey, it's like you can skate pretty fucking fast. And so even if you switch to another guy, like your ability to check and steal the puck. So the puck changes, possession very quickly. It's just like a way more engaging thing. And then of course, actually scoring requires some strategies. Like you can do a one-time, you can pass the puck to another player who's ready, like locked and loaded to shoot it in. So hockey games, I think, as sports games go, as actual games and not as simulators, like it is one of the best sports from a just fun to play as a video game sport. And there is a one that's had my eye for a while. It finally went on sale because Steam is selling, has a co-op game sale. And apparently this game has a co-op mode, which I'm now separately excited about. I wonder if I could trick Becky or Jeremy into playing this with me. It's called Tape to Tape, and it's a roguelite, if you know what that is, a run-based hockey game where as soon as you lose, your run ends and you got to start the game all over again. But each run, you get different skills. You're building out a team. You can recruit, kind of like hero players. Or you're kind of have some stock guys. So instead of like leveling up, no, your skills do go up. So like certain attributes, like you can, over the course of your run, do certain things or acquire certain abilities or equipment that like, make your speed go up or your shot accuracy go up and whatnot. And so you're trying to improve the team over the course of your run faster than the difficulty curve ramps up. And so I'm describing like a lot of roguelite and roguelike games here. That's how a lot of them work. Like Balatro is that, right? It's like you're trying to make your little set of jokers better and more optimized to maximize the amount of points that poker hands make before the required amount of points that you earn in each round goes so high that you can't earn that much, right? So you're leveling up of your people in the run, which is partly skill based because you got to be good at hockey. That's going up, and you want that curve to grow faster than the difficulty spike of each subsequent match as a harder opponent. Yeah, it's that's what it is. It's cartoony. It's violent. Not super violent. It's not like you're in fights constantly, but it's very irreverent. I remember watching and be like, this is like if Letterkenny was a video game. And so there you go. Tape to Tape, $15 on sale on Steam right now. Back to work games. So I've been playing Yakuza Like a Dragon. I've been mentioning them on and off it, playing on the Steam Deck, It's really difficult because I want to play when I want to play. And if I'm in bed, I want to play on the Steam Deck or if I'm mobile. But if you sleep the Steam Deck, it doesn't sync your save to the cloud, but it syncs that a save is happening, right? So it doesn't actually sync the file. It just syncs knowledge that the file has been updated. So then you go to your computer and you're like, I know, I'll play that game that I was playing on my Steam Deck earlier. That's currently in a suspended state as opposed to a full shutdown, because I'm not thinking about that. And then it'll be like, okay, you can start the game, but just so you know, the cloud save on this computer is out of date because your other one hasn't uploaded it because your Steam Deck is just asleep. Like, this seems like a software problem that is tractable. Like, Steam could be in the background, like uploading saves more often, or working with publishers to like change how save games, like when is it atomic, when is it safe. But Steam will only upload the save after the game is fully exited and the executable has finished running. So that basically means I just like never fucking play it anymore. Well, I finally, I got off my fat ass and went to the other room and like shut down the Steam Deck properly so I could play Yakuza on the big TV last night, because I needed my spreadsheets and I needed multiple tabs because I'm playing the Like a Dragon business mode. Every one of these Yakuza games, sure, it's an action adventure or it's a turn-based RPG, but they always have one or two like game within a game games. And this one has a business management game where you have a confections company that is really run down and shabby. And you walk in, they're like, hey, you want to be the CEO? You can be the CEO. You willing to go to the shareholder meeting and argue with these chuckle fucks? Go be my guest. Here's the employees. Here's all the general ledger, the P&L and all that. Go have fun. So you get this company and it's struggling, and then your goal is to like make it a successful company and go up the charts in terms of its value. It's work. It's work. And you could just sit there and I know now that, so the point of last night was I got over the hump. I got past the first shareholder meeting successfully. Then I had a couple of rounds of the game where I understand the loop better. I understand like what makes the numbers go up, what makes it go down, how to manage the staff and all that. And with Yakuza 0, the version of this game is you're managing a hostess bar. And so you got to like maintain a roster of hostesses. You set prices? You have certain clientele and stuff. And like basically like every day while it's like running, like there's the prep for business phase and then there's the during business phase in that case. Here it's more like there's the prep for business phase and then figure out what to do with your limited resources. Do you invest in your people or your physical plant, or advertising, or other opportunities that are coming and going? And then the actual like business itself is sort of on autopilot and it's not interactive. But man, I love shit like that. So that I'm finally at the good part after all that boring story and game mechanics and all the sort of like the game stuff. Like, get that game out of the way. I'm finally at the work part of the game. That's the juicy core of the apple that I like in video games. So I'm back to recommending it again. If you've heard me talk about it and you're still not sold, it's like, what if you got to run a rundown confection company, mostly in a spreadsheet-like format? Not very interactive, but you will have to learn how to read different numbers and stuff, and you'll probably be wasting a lot of time on a walkthrough or a guide or watching videos of other men who look like me explaining how to do it. I'm not really selling it. Something I would really sell, if I could, Alien Romulus. I watched that last night. I was home alone and I knew Becky didn't want to watch it with me, and it's on Hulu. Alien Romulus, fucking great movie. If you like alien movies, Alien Romulus is great. Now, you might like the first Alien movie, in which case you'll like Alien Romulus because it's the same thing. It's just new. It's got a younger crew. It's just 5 people instead of, well, it's younger, I don't know, relatively. Like, I don't know how young Sigourney Weaver was at the time. Maybe they're the same age crew, but she's gotten older, I've noticed. Just putting that out there. It's a new, hot, fresh, young crew ready to die from the fucking alien in their goddamn ship. Spoiler alert. It's real good. It's real good. It's as one of those, it's a banger. The contrivances that they come up with to kind of keep the plot moving forward are all excellent. things that you would normally stand out as just like terrible plot holes or like eye roll, like are all like actually, especially in the universe of Alien, like entirely believable. And maybe only for that reason are they believable. But if you're like me and your favorite Alien movie was literally Prometheus because it finally explained what the fuck was going on in this universe, but in a way that treated you like an intellectual who could think through and reason through the puzzle box of the game. Hey, you all like Severance, right? They're not telling you shit about fuck. They're not telling you why those goats are there. Spoiler alert, there's goats at one point in Severance. But that one, because people go into it knowing that this is like a dark dramedy, they go in expecting it's like, all right, let's try to watch the mystery unfold today in Severance. That was what Prometheus was. It was a dark thriller, not quite horror movie, trying to explain this very confusing world to you, and you rejected it. And the internet made fun of it and gave it bad reviews, but it was the best fucking one of these things. Anyway, if you're like me and you liked Prometheus and you even tolerated and were fine with Alien Covenant that came after it, this is also really good because it also does the thing of it really expands on the lore and explains what the fuck happened after the first ship and yada yada, but like also like you learn a lot about what it's like to exist politically in the alien world. I'm like, yes, that's what I want to know. It explains like what is that black goop and like how the fuck does it work and what are the side effects of injecting it into rats. Like Alien Romulus. Good movie. People think Alien is a horror franchise. I don't like horror movies. It is not a horror franchise. It's an action thriller with a monster as the bad guy instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever. And there's body horror stuff and there's like there's scary looking creatures and whatnot. And if that's your thing, if you've got like arachnophobia, you just can't look at like weird monster stuff, like, okay. But it's not the sort of jump scare traditional horror movie. It's just not. Do I have anything else to recommend? Well, I already shilled for Tesla and mentioned I got a referral link coming your way in the show notes. Thanks for sponsoring the show, I guess. Is there anything else new? No. Hard work. I've been working real hard. I recommend hard work. Let's see what's shaking in the mailbag.
You've got mail.
This one's titled Hot and Spicy Takes. From a name I should have asked how to pronounce correctly before. Vasja? Vasja? Vasha? Whichever it is, I apologize for getting the name wrong at least once and probably twice. They write, I've been following your work and talks probably from around 2015, likely one of the Mountain Ruby talks or similar. I found your take on competence amusing, as from the outside, your competence and skill are obvious. Again, you want to be read on the show, starting with a compliment. Smart move. No one can achieve what you have without having it, pussyfooting around or not. I wanted to ask if you had ever given recommendations to others when they work in environments where they feel a similar way. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I've gotten feedback through various means, usually by explicit request to come help an underperforming team. I've gotten feedback across a few jobs that seem to tell me I'm a decent developer. Congratulations. That is great to know. I'm glad that you're a decent developer and that you're being recognized. I don't think I'm near where you're at. Doing the work you describe with setting up the automation for Becky in 8 hours is quite a bit faster than I think I could manage. However, I do find myself oftentimes being miles ahead of others, trying my best to ship code that is less buggy, pairing with others whenever possible, giving presentations, and trying to teach others the principles of good programming. However, oftentimes I feel a bit alone. I've had the pleasure of, throughout my career, working with some exceptional programmers. Unfortunately, I often find myself at the other end of the company from them, both of us doing our best work to, quote unquote, keep the ship afloat, so to speak. Any thoughts on where to go from here? Or if there even is somewhere else to go, other than building your own company or team, or just continuing to try to grow your skills until you can really say, I am fucking competent. In either case, thank you for your time and all the time you've done in the Rails community and beyond. We are still listening. A good way to end the email. Just remind me that like people listen to this shit. Not a ton of people. You're the insiders, but like enough of you that sometimes I get a nice email like this. Well, Vasha. Thank you very much for the email. I think this is tough, right? Because there's two kinds of gradation that I would have you focus on. There's differences in skill in any population of people, like at a company, and differences in give a shit. Now, the give a shit metric, it's a function of multiple things, right? Like maybe at a particular company, they reward the wrong things. And so like, there's nothing in it for me to like give a shit about this job. So it might be an environmental factor is the reason I'm disengaged. Or it might be something intrinsic. It might just be like, I don't really fucking like working. I don't like this job. I don't like being a programmer, right? You don't, and the thing about it is when you're trying to, at an employer, if you're trying to assess whether an individual doesn't give a shit for their own reasons or for some systemic reason, you don't get to know the answer to that question. That's something that's only in their head, right? But it's to think it's all just about your skill level versus other people's skill and ability level drastically oversimplifies this into a literally, one-dimensional equation of like, at this company, there's only so many, people that are over here at the tall end of the spectrum. And, as a result, the company naturally, like you described, like spreads them out in different teams. And now we don't even get to collaborate. What the hell? That's natural, right? Like as skills go, like you should have blended teams and some people are more experienced. Eventually you're going to reach a point where like the company can't provide you with anyone that's more experienced or more highly skilled. And like, if you want to move on and find that, you might have to go to a company that has an even higher bar or is in a domain that's really, really hard, right? Like maybe you go into aviation and you're like, man, figuring out this stuff because the stakes are really high is really, really hard. Just ask Boeing, right? They're having a great fucking year. So I think when I'm analyzing this, either as a consultant or talking with a friend, I would add extra dimensions on because it's not a simple, like your relationship with work, I guarantee is multifactored. It's not just, I want to get better at this craft. It's also like the impact that you want, because you're a give a shit person and you are finding a way to thrive in a give a shit way in this environment, right? The environment has not totally snuffed out your ability to give a shit. And so when you get recognized as a great employee, like that's your supervisors and your managers looking at you and saying like, good job, both being good at this and also giving a shit. Those two things are necessary. Sometimes, and this was like key to my consulting practice, and I think an important insight to anyone who's working as a contractor or an outsider at an organization, is that because you have an outsider's perspective, you have more visibility. I would have more visibility just quickly at a snap glance to identify what are the patterns that I'm witnessing here that are typical of gradations in skill. And what are the patterns that are common anti-patterns or stumbling blocks that you see happen a lot that would prevent people from giving a shit? That's why the founding book of Test Double with Todd and I was not like Agile Web Development with Ruby on Rails. It was Drive by David Pink, like the three things that you need to be great at a job and to be intrinsically motivated and to have that drive are autonomy, control. I said earlier, I'm big on autonomy. So like, and I think everyone who gives a shit is, and that's why, the people who are attracted to a company like Test Double, like no one forgets about autonomy. Yes, we love to have it. We love to have control over how we do our job. A purpose, some sense that we're doing this hard work for some fucking reason. Now, the purpose for people who work at product companies might be, I want to make that ride sharing app that makes it so that, I'm putting Justin in close quarters with somebody who smells like his last 3 meals were eaten in this seat. I want to make that happen. I want to give Justin that experience, and they succeeded. So, but that person, whoever built Lyft, like maybe they found purpose in that. Again, that's their task, not mine. And the third thing that you need is a path to mastery. Some process by which the future you can look back on present you and be like, I've come a long way. And that includes, that path to mastery is not just the company giving you some like sort of learning path, right? It's you yourself having the tools you need to introspect, to put challenges in front of yourself and to look back and then see like how far you came. One thing that I've struggled with at a few different companies is when I'm talking to an extremely high level developer who says, I've run out of challenges. I've tapped out. I've learned everything that this place can teach me. And then if I'm looking at them, because as an outsider, everything just sort of looks like a role-playing game almost. If they're a character in my role-playing party, I'm like, yes, you have indeed. You're 100 out of 100 in skill points, or 99 out of 100 in skill points for the raw act of programming computers. But like, in terms of being a decent fucking human being, you're only a 60, right? Or being somebody that people will confide in and trust through hard problems, or somebody who they'll talk to at all when they're under duress, right? Which is an important trait to have. If you're going to be somebody who can help projects through to success, you got to be somebody that like people trust and that people pull into the room and to pull into their problems when maybe another developer is that person I mentioned earlier, shitting razor blades and not shipping their code for weeks because they feel unsafe. If they don't talk to you about it, they don't pull you in, or you don't do the work to go to them and build a relationship such that they do, then you're not, then there's room to grow, because you could have been the kind of person that could have overcome that obstacle. It's just that maybe that obstacle couldn't have been overcome with you coding even harder, faster, better. And when I tell people this, inevitably, when I explain to people like that there's a multifaceted number of skills, some are soft skills and some are technical. There's other technical skills too. Like, for example, maybe you're really good at coding, but when I watch you, like your editor environment, your tool chain is all fucked. It's all fuckity fucked. I'm watching you not use keyboard shortcuts. And I'm like, yeah, I'm watching time just fly out the window right now. So yeah, you might know the exact right code to write, but if you're just hunting, pecking, and you're using the mouse a lot, like you could be going faster. Or maybe you don't know how to like optimize feedback loops at all. Maybe you spend a lot of time just like sitting and staring and thinking out into space, like what's that perfect like 30-line function going to look like? And you're planning it all on your head and you're thinking through and you got a plan, you go at the whiteboard and then you go to the computer and you write it all out exactly as such. But 2 hours have passed and then you run it and maybe it doesn't work the first time. Well, if you don't run the code a lot, it'll take a long time to test your hypotheses. And so if it takes a long time to test your hypotheses, you've just made it very expensive to be wrong, right? And so like an important technical skill that's not just coding is designing and executing very, very fast feedback from the computer. Every time I have a thought, how do I codify that thought into an action that I feed into the computer to arrive at an answer that tells me if that thought is on the right track or the wrong track? That is what it means to take ownership of and drive and design a feedback loop with the system. So that's an important skill that very few developers ever take on, because you don't show up to work one day and then they say, okay, kids, we're learning about feedback loops today. That's just not how it fucking works. No one is good at this typically. It's just one of the 36 things that are assumed to be part of the job. And the people who are in positions of management and leadership, they typically, even if they were developers, they probably weren't great at that, because most people aren't. So they don't know how to reinforce it institutionally. But like, that's a great example of something that's like, well, when I talk about like being as good at my job as I can be and learning everything I can at this job, it's like, there's very often a lot of these other ancillary or supplementary skills that could stand to be improved. And yeah, when people hear this, they're often like, well, either I don't care and I just only want to write the bestest, hardest assed code in the world. I'm like, you make a web app is usually what I reply with. Like, go do some fucking science, go fold some proteins. Like, hard computing is elsewhere, right? If you look at that and you think, oh, this is just some soft talk bullshit, he just wants us all to kumbaya and get along better. It's like, dude, I am a fucking political creature. I'm not here to be your friend, right? If I'm your consultant, if I'm working at this company, it's like there's an outcome somebody's paying for me to get to. And if I got to like, lie, cheat, steal, and kill, I mean, this is coming right on the heels of the sex slave story. Sorry, just normal slaves. I don't know that Elite Dangerous has sex slaves per se. Fill in the gap with what kind of slaves they are. That's not important right now. What's important right now is that one of the skills that I have that a lot of people lack, that a lot of people think is unimportant, is office politics. I gave a whole talk about it in 2013 at Madison Ruby about like an experience where I essentially I had to work the room, all of the different stakeholders. I had one-on-one relationships with each of them. I had to finesse and finagle. Becky would say manipulate. I would say influence them down different directions to arrive at an outcome where 6 months later, they all saw things my way. Up to and including all agreed with me that, Barry should be fired or Barry needs to exit the company, right? I've gotten multiple executives ousted from companies by doing underhanded shit like that. I still have my integrity. Didn't lie. Didn't cheat, except for the times I lied and cheat a little bit. Like I feel good about it because I'm willing to take the long form view sometimes and be like, you know what? This person that I'm working against right now, he is making life a living fucking hell for a lot of people. And he is hurting him. Sometimes it's like he's taking out his daddy issues on dozens or hundreds of developers, and whether he knows it or not, like it's not fair. And there's no straightforward way to oust, leaders and managers typically. And so that means, it's just like refactoring. You're good at refactoring, right? That's, I have to introduce some new feature, but the way that the code is currently structured, it would be really hard to force that feature in. So what do? I back away, I refactor. I kind of move the bits and bobs, reshape the code so that, that new feature can kind of slide in more gracefully. Because then the system will be shaped like a system that is still working, still doing all the things exactly as it was. It just has this new little hole in the middle that's a perfect fit for whatever that feature needs to be. I do the same thing, not just with code, but with human problems, right? It's like, well, this organization, if I were just to introduce this one process change or tell them that Barry needs to get fired or whatever it is, if I were just to do that now, the organization wouldn't know what to do with it. It would bounce right off because they're not factored the way that they would succeed if you pulled that little block out of the Jenga tower right at that moment. But you move things and pieces around. It's like, hey, what if you took these two squads and combined them so that they had a shared interest in like an extrinsic, observable business objective, right? So that instead of just hemming and hawing and fighting and being distracted, they would collectively be on the same side of an argument against your incompetent product organization, right? And now they'd see that their real enemy isn't each other arguing about API contracts, is that the product organization doesn't have the business's best interests for maximizing revenue or profitability or whatever. And they're the ones running in circles, but you can't see that right now. So what if I get these people together? So now they're working as a team and they're healthier. It moves from a theory of constraints perspective. The organization's kind of eyeballs or attention from the two teams that they thought were the problem onto the next worst constraint, which might be, it turns out that even if you give them a competent team, the real problem is the product people don't know what to do with that, right? And you move on and you solve the next problem. That's hard, right? It's not for everybody. It's a different skill set. It's a different kind of person necessarily that might be the best coder ever. But that's just a couple random examples, right? Maybe it's security. Maybe it's something I'm not good at is mentoring and teaching. Even though I do a lot of bloviating, I'm not a good teacher because I get impatient and I don't care about people. Again, sorry about the slaves stuff. I feel free to write in your complaints. Just pick any email address you want and just don't put it at any domain you want other than Searls.co. And write your complaints there, and I will read them if I get it, but I probably won't, just statistically speaking. Thank you so much for writing in, Voss. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm gonna land at Vasja. Please write in again. Tell us how to pronounce your name. I'll read that one just to say sorry. Let's just do one more. We're coming right at 3 hours. You're tired. You've had a long day. You're asking yourself, why do I listen to this shit? Jesse writes, yo, Jesse. He writes, I just heard you talk about the Nintendo Alarmo clock. I've got one at home. At one point, I got back upstairs after being out of bed for over an hour to find this alarm going full tilt, screaming Zelda combat sounds. To recap, the Alarmo, which just went for sale for US-based like Nintendo Online customers and soon will be in retailers, I think next week or next month. The Alarmo is a product that my brother imported from me for Japan as my birthday gift. And the alarms are initially very gentle, playing like Mario music or Zelda music. But then if you like stay in bed, it gets louder and louder and louder until it detects movement and then exits. Jesse continues. Turns out my cat had jumped on the bed to take a nap and was just ignoring all the noise. And so his cat was causing the problem. His cat was, it can't tell if you're a cat or a human, right? It's a fun but useless product. Yeah. And I think we're seeing a little bit of a renaissance of fun but useless pieces of hardware, especially when they're relatively affordable, right? I mean, you can get the equivalent of like a full-blown Linux computer with like a Wi-Fi stack and stuff at cost, right? Of like $10, $15, right? Like then you can build a $60, $70 product around that and still, be profitable. And somehow we've entered that era and we don't see that many interesting one-off products because we're all still thinking about convergence. It's a combination of we're kind of prone to think of convergence and devices that do all things for all people, just because that's what we've been seeing for the last 10, 15 years. But also like everything's got to tie back to a platform play somehow. So it's like, well, I would make an e-ink thing that's a calendar that sticks to the wall like that one that people are talking about. But like if I don't have platform hooks into the Apple Calendar and the Google Calendar or whatever, no one's going to actually buy it or use it because it's going to feel like an island. Like my Books Palma was, which is like a little e-reader that's an Android. And it's like, can't get my Kindle stuff on here easily. This is a pain in the ass. Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to call it there. Coming right up on 3 hours. I hope this was time well spent. If you don't hear from me again, I probably full self drove myself right off a fucking cliff. We'll see how that works. Life is a winding road, I guess. I did not expect to be here even 3 months ago, but here we are.